Good evening and welcome to the March 13th meeting of the Richmond Selectboard. Before we begin, does anybody want to make a public comment? Go ahead.
This is Bart. I'd just like to thank June, previous member of the Select Board, and welcome Lisa, current new member of the Select Board. And thank you to people who stepped up to be candidates this last time around. I think it works best when people participate as candidates and as voters.
Agreed. I want to personally thank Adam, Angela, Lisa, and Lisa for stepping up, for MMC TV for hosting the candidates forum, and for everybody. The campaign, although contested, was very civil. I had several very pleasant conversations with Angela. I'd never met her before. I thought she was very civil, ran a very polite campaign. So that's one of the things I appreciate about living in Richmond. And I want to extend thanks to June for her stint on the select board. Jay?
I would just like to also thank the JPs and the volunteers who worked at the polls. We were there till 9:30 at night because of various issues that came up, but we can't do the elections without the volunteers who work there, and we're very grateful to them. And also I'd like to say thank you for everybody who brought food, soup, cakes, and so forth to keep us fed on Tuesday.
And I want to welcome Lisa to her first select board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And welcome. And we're sorry about the sign.
That's okay. You know, I'm kind of.
I'll have a conversation with those responsible. Okay. First on the agenda tonight is reorganization. This is when we choose chair, vice chair, board secretary, and official newspapers.
Point of order. So Lisa, have you been sworn in?
Yes.
There you go.
I don't know if I brought it with me, but I did.
You know,
I already
trust-
confirmed.
I trust you, and I don't think I trust her.
I said I do. She said, oh, yeah.
So first, I guess we should handle selection of chair and vice chair.
So can I start by a motion I'd like to nominate Jay as chair of the select board.
Thank you, Bart.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jeff. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a motion to nominate Jay Furr as chair of the select board. Hearing no further discussion, calling the motion to a vote.
Abstain.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bart, aye.
And David proudly voting aye. So Jeff, this is the point, Jay, this is the point where I ask you if you want to take over now or if you want me to keep going.
Actually, could you do the vice chair and then I'll come up?
Okay. So we've chosen chair.
I would like
Jay is our chair.
I would like to nominate Bart Hill as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the motion is for, well, first of all, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't.
Okay.
Lindy Johnson.
I will not seek, nor will I accept. Okay, so the motion is for Bard Hill to be vice chair. Absent any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote.
Jay, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, abstain.
And David proudly voting aye. Congratulations, you're the vice chair
Thanks so much. And thank you for being chair.
for a couple days. Okay, so you ready to go? Okay, we're at board secretary. Do you want the copy of the agenda?
I'll use that electronic there.
Okay.
But Lisa said you're gonna stay sitting there, or like, well,
What's that?
you asked me if I was gonna stay sitting there.
Oh,
again,
yeah.
And I just kind of like said, well.
It didn't last long.
Well, he sat there for the long.
That wasn't that a meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry for all the mess back here.
Yeah. What's this one that we only hear?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, okay. So our next item of business is to appoint our board secretary. Duncan Wardwell has been our board secretary, transcribing our meetings and taking the minutes for the last year. Does anybody else want the job? Okay, do I have a motion to appoint Duncan Wardwell as secretary?
Hey, this is David. I would move to appoint Duncan Wardwell as the select board secretary.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, please state your name and vote.
David, I.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Okay, congratulations, Duncan. You're here, you're muted, but if you would like to do a little yoo-hoo or something, you're welcome to take it.
Speech.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Okay, our next item of business is our selection of our official newspapers of record. We are required to place public notices in certain official papers. Front Porch Forum does not count. Although we obviously post things there anyway. For the last year, we've designated the Free Press, the Times Inc., the Williston Observer, and 7 Days as our papers of record. Is there any discussion or comments?
How much does it cost to do the free press?
A lot.
It is quite a bit more. We actually went through a big process a few years ago to double check and look at how much it would cost for a similar ad. I forget the exact amount, but it was enough that moving to Williston Observer when time allows was preferred by the board at that time.
It is significant due to the timing of notices that need to be published. There are times where we are more or less required to use the Burlington Free Press just because of their print distribution schedule. There are times where we can't get something into the Times Inc., the Williston Observer, or 7 days in time to make a legal requirement for the notice. So there are times when we have to use the Free Press, but if we have the Free Press, the Times Inc., the Williston Observer, and 7 days going on the print cycle, we can use the others and save a substantial amount of money.
So what you're saying is that sometimes we use the free press, but not all times we use the free press?
Correct.
That sounds good to me.
I just observed, for those of you who aren't antiquarians like myself and read a printed newspaper, the Burlington Free Press is no longer distributed on Saturdays. So it's just a comment about if you were looking to post something on a Saturday in the paper of record, the physical paper of record, Saturday will have more.
That's good to know.
Sad commentary.
Okay.
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
As part, I would move to designate Burlington Free Press, Times Inc., Williston Observer, and 7 Days as the official newspapers of the town of Richmond.
Do I have a second?
This is David. I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on our official papers of record? Okay, seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Okay, thank you. Our next item of business is consideration of the appointment of a delinquent tax collector. There's a little bit of background here. Lori Brisbane has served in this role since 2011. However, prior to 2021, she was not getting reappointed every year, and we should have been. In 2021, we did reappoint her. We overlooked this in 2022, but we need to make sure that it's done each year going forward. Lori has provided a letter of interest and chart of delinquent taxes paid in FY22, which is in the packet. She's unable to meet on Monday evenings, but if we would like to bring up that list of delinquent taxes for public questions and comment. Stand by.
And there was. Sorry. There was an update to this. Okay,
There we go.
there we go. Let me make it a little bigger.
Okay, so if you can summarize this for us.
So this is a look at what has been collected during the fiscal year 22. So essentially her last complete year of work. The top chart here shows how much was collected. The years down the side are the amounts from those tax years. So in 10-11, she collected $2,641 from principal, interest, and penalty in 2011. You can follow that on down. for a total of $94,000 collected in FY 22 for previous fiscal years. Looking at the delinquent tax report outstanding, this is how much was outstanding as of the end of fiscal year 22 from each of the previous 4 fiscal years. Obviously, FY 22 is the highest. They've had about 6 weeks since the May 15th deadline to the end of June to make payments on those delinquent taxes. The total amount of delinquent taxes is now down to around $8,800. So been a fairly productive year to work with. And I will note that if you check the packet earlier, the outstanding taxes looked lower. I caught that with Linda and Connie today. We looked at it. I think what happened was when the initial report was run, it was run like year to date in December when it was run, rather than going back to June 30th. And also with an error in the town report that we noticed today. So just wanted to make sure that we were being transparent with that and put the correct number out there at the end of this year 22.
Okay, does the board have any questions?
I do. So, one of the things that we talked about during the ARPA funds is that, the one use of the ARPA funds was for lost revenue. And it was my understanding at the time that we actually didn't have much or any lost revenue, although we were able to claim it as, I forget what the term was, Joe, but
Revenue loss.
revenue loss. Which afforded us a lot of flexibility. However, this seems to imply, if you look back over the last 10 years, that there was a significant impact here,
Well, by revenue loss, they mean your taxes went down.
So it looks to me like Lori's done a heck of a good job, catching up but it looks like there was some pain here in 2019, the 2020 and particularly 2020, 21, 10, 20, 30 times as much as any other year.
Yeah, Linda, parent, I'm sorry, go ahead,
I was
Josh.
just say those are also, I think, more recent years, and I don't have a complete breakdown on like the total number of delinquent at the end of this year for each one. But typically older years, people have been, they're paying them down kind of because they've had all the time to get those paid down.
They
But-
catch them.
Yeah, they've been catching
Linda,
up.
could you come to the mic?
And also some of the ones that were being carried for quite a few years, they've sold their properties. And we had quite a few people that got money from Vermont Housing to pay their taxes up. And the unfortunate thing is that after they do that, they don't pay anymore. So the same ones are going to be on the list, the same properties, because they may have got paid up with this free money, but they haven't paid another penny on this year, so. That's too bad.
It seems like one of the things that Lori is trying to do is to work out a payment plan.
She does, and like we had a check bounce, we got it back today. I told her and she got right on the phone to the person that wrote the bad check, and they're supposed to be coming to see me tomorrow with cash.
Good. So, I guess my point was there was a little bit of concern that there was so much more than previous years. And I appreciate her effort to collect, and it seems like that's been successful.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other comments about, again, the subject before us is reappointing Lori Brisbane. Does anybody from the public, anybody on the Zoom have any questions about our delinquent tax situation? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
This part, I move to appoint Lori Brisbane as delinquent tax collector for the town of Richmond for a term ending on town meeting day 2024.
Okay, this is David, a second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Aye.
Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I.
Jay, I have just one suggestion about our agenda. I know folks from UMIAC are here and we're about to talk about conservation reserve. And since they're here waiting, at least one of them from out of town, that if we can bump them forward, and it might go next to the conservation reserve fund topic, especially if anybody is here. So Judy's here. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any objection to moving item H to the next item on the agenda?
We're doing conservation then,
Oh, are you?
Sure, either one.
just because I know Judy.
Yeah.
Okay,
also
okay,
great.
so we'll
No,
move.
no, go
item-
ahead and let the UMIAC people go first. That's fine with me.
Okay, so we will move to item H on the agenda. So let me scroll forward. Okay, our next item, item H, is consideration of installing a ladder on a town-owned parcel at Overrockers parking area to aid people in exiting the Winooski River. I will entertain representative from UMIAC to tell us about this request.
So, hi, my name is Steve Brownlee, owner of UMIAC Outfitters, here with my manager, Matt, runs our program here in Richmond. What we're looking to do,
Hold on a second, yeah, what's, whose feedback is that Becky?
Yes.
Okay, Becky, I'm gonna mute you.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
so what we're looking to do is provide a safe way for folks, not only for the people coming out of the river, getting up into Overrocker Park that have floated down the river, whether it be guests of UMIAC floating a river tube or just folks canoeing and kayaking or tubing down the river. We want to put steps in there so that it's safer for people to get up and down the bank and also to minimize erosion that happens on the bank. So these were steps that were sort of given permission, so to speak, last year by somebody from the town and approved us to go ahead and put the ladder in. And now we're looking to get the select board's permission as well as official permit. So, you know,
Okay, so this is are these steps or is this a ladder? I apologize.
it's a ladder. Yeah, it's a ladder with
Sorry, you want
with
to bring up the
steps. And
picture?
there's-
Yep.
We do have a diagram of the,
Yes, if you would.
and these are, this diagram, these are steps that we're utilizing a construction process that is well used throughout Vermont and New England. The folks from Northern Forest Canoe Trail have developed this ladder system or step system, if you will, to get you up out.
Okay, and so these, is that an illustration or there's the actual steps?
That's an illustration.
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
not a picture of them in place.
Yeah, I
That-
did
do we-
send pictures, so further on, you should see a
Yeah, I
picture
thought
of
we
the
did.
actual steps that we put in.
Okay,
Let me see if I can find it.
I was trying to remember. We couldn't. Okay, if we don't, we don't. So the questions before the select board are our zoning administrative officer at the time. What was her name at the time?
So that was we had interim zoning administrative officer, Kayla Vaccaro.
Okay, so Kayla gave permission at the time, but our current Tyler Macia, our current zoning officer, believes this needs to go through conditional use review. And so the questions before us are, do we want this letter to be installed? If yes, then we would need to set up conditional use review. And if yes, we would then need to set up a contract with UMIAC as recommended by our insurance, that you will maintain the letter and assume all liabilities. So Josh, what do we need to do now? Just discuss the letter or?
I think so. This is part, so as somebody who's been to this part of the riverbank a lot, for those of you who haven't been, it's silt, right? So unlike this image here, it's really silt and it's part of historical floodplain where the rivers want to move back and forth. But literally the place, because it is such silt, basically held together by vegetation, what you tend to see is where there's traffic, there is erosion. It literally starts to fall down. That's what I know from observation. And I know that in the past, people have talked about different ways of getting down, whether for UMIAC or others accessing the gravel beds and riverbank there. So I think the image is good, except for it doesn't capture the actual site for what that's worth. And then the reason I wanted to move it forward to see if Judy or Conservation Commission had any comments about where this sits on the riverbank in that area.
Okay, before we jump to Judy, any other questions or comments?
So there has been this type of ladder there over the past year? Yeah, all last summer. Okay.
It was
Was
there.
there any consequence? Did more or less erosion?
Much less erosion. I mean, it solved that issue. And it was a much safer situation. One thing I will also point out is where we have located it on the river is on the inside, or as it goes around the bend. So there's not going to, it's the least turbulent area for any erosion that could happen from flooding on the river. So it's a very protected area. If there is a flash flood, an increase in the river flow in the middle of the summer, it's also much more protected. It's not likely to get swept out where it's located because it's in sort of the eddy of the on the inside bend of that
This
corner.
would be a permanent structure?
It would come in and out every season.
Okay, and you would take it in and out?
And like we put it in the beginning of the season, we took it out at the end of our season. We rent space here in Richmond, and we're here from the middle of May till the middle of September. And we basically run these in June and July and August, and then we're
For some of
We'll
these,
pull it
I've
out.
seen kind of a slide or a rail for canoes to
Mhm.
go down.
Mhm.
Is that
I've seen this
something-
too, yeah.
Is that something you're considering at all, or?
It has not been something that we considered. It certainly is something that you could do, but generally those rails, they're used to slide canoes downriver. And we aren't seeing a lot of canoe traffic putting in Richmond and going down towards Essex. There tends to be more traffic going from Bolton Dam down to Richmond.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, any other thoughts from the board?
I just observe in terms of the canoe access that I've seen much more commonly that people are putting in like at the Beacon Preserve.
Yeah.
Where you can park.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I don't know, 75 feet, 100 feet,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Whereas here it's a bit of a more of a schlep from parking. Down.
I have not seen much canoers or kayakers using this access point because like Bart says, there's better access points, but it is tubers like this section of the river because it has some flow as we get further downstream. Richmond, as the river slows right up and it's not very pleasant. You don't move very far if the wind's blowing.
Okay. Okay, are we ready for input from Judy? Okay, Judy, the floor is yours.
Hi, all. Thank you for asking for my input. I believe our friends at UMIAC are being quite responsible about this, and I appreciate their efforts to curb erosion and make access or exits easier. This is also the kind of thing that if you needed a financial assistance, the Conservation Reserve Fund is open to all that benefits the town, that is. So.
Okay.
So if you do see canoers and you want to put in a slide, come talk to us.
Okay, Kara,
Since this is a commercial entity, Judy, I appreciate that, but I really want us to be cautious of commercial entities with conservation funds. But my comment more so is we heard from the Parking Advisory Committee and we heard from the neighborhood at the end of Cochrane Road with parking and you guys having to do an ordinance there. One of their biggest concerns was the commercial use of the Bombardier Field parking lot. And it might be a great time to have the discussion, since you have UMIAC's owner and manager here, to see about the possibility of UMIAC not launching their rafters from the Bombardier Field parking lot or dropping them off right in the road on Cochrane Road, rather than maybe going up further Bolton Way and having people launch up there. Because it's a huge issue that you're having to deal with parking along Cochrane Road and people getting out of the UMIAC van while others are passing along the side. So I think it's a perfect opportunity to maybe negotiate something here.
Okay, well, thank you, Kara. The item before us has to do specifically with the latter, but because we do have the representative from UMIAC here, would you like to respond?
Yes, well, we certainly are open to other launch sites. And as a matter of fact, we have been searching for other launch sites. And we have, we've met with the town of Bolton. We did that a couple of weeks ago. And we're working with the state of Vermont, Forest Parks and Rec. So we are indeed looking at ways to relieve things if we can. And we're fully aware of that Bombardier park is a bit of a hot spot from a parking standpoint.
Have you talked to the people at the DeForge generating plant? Is that one of the places? Because that's the dam, and there is a place to put in.
Green Mountain Power. We
Yeah.
have spoken to Green Mountain Power.
And are they? What have they said?
Well, they're receptive because they want to see, public recreation happen. The challenge that you have in that section of the river is that not all of the clients that want to float the Winooski River, want to do the severity of the rapids that can happen
Okay,
up at
that's a
that
good point.
section. So there's a safety issue there, but there's also it takes all day to float from the dam all the way down to Richmond.
Okay.
And if it's a hot day, that person
People
might
don't
get
wanna
a
do that.
little bit toasty by the time they get to the end.
Yeah, I enjoy putting in there, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean everybody does.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments about questions for UMIAC?
So how do we have this conversation? So, I have to say the parking and the traffic on Concord Road, a very popular topic to us. So what will be your process of deciding on any future launch site? What
Well, the same process that we're having here. We have discussions with the appropriate folks and see what,
how long do you think that'll take?
and we've been working on it for months and it will probably continue until spring.
Do you think you'll have any resolution before floating season?
Yeah, if we don't have it resolved before floating season, we probably are not going to be coming back to Richmond,
Okay. So that's
kind
an
of a
item.
reason for being here.
That's certainly an item for us to, on both sides, follow up on. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. The next, we don't have a motion in the memo for exactly what we do, but the questions were, do we want to, are we okay with the letter? And if we are, we want to proceed to conditional use.
Excuse me, Jay, I still have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kara, go ahead.
Because I just wanted to see what their input was on the other topic. I strongly recommend that the select board hold off on making decisions on this at this point in time, because we already know that there's been an issue with Cochrane Road. There's been an issue with parking. There's been an issue with speed, with out-of-towners, with in-towners. I really think you need to give UMIAC the opportunity to go see if they have another solution for their launch area and come back to you. Because if they don't have another solution for their launch area and it's still the Bombardier Field and no agreement's been made with the land trust to even allow the Bombardier Field parking next season, then you've really created a cluster that you have not properly planned for. I'm not saying no, don't do this. I'm just saying, please, quote, have your ducks in order.
Right. Well, that is the question before us. The first question is, do we want to approve installation of the ladder? As they've said, they take it in at the end of the season, put it in at the start of the next season, which we are not yet at. What does the select board have to say about that? Are you,
Just process wise.
yeah,
So the question really would be, if you wanted, you're right, you're sort of ahead of this, but just to give you sort of a look ahead. If the board wants to have a ladder in there, we need to go to the conditional use review, which is going to take some number of weeks to complete. Tyler is on right now, our zoning administrative officer. I probably get him on in April, but it might be till May till we get onto the DRB. So that
At this point, they wouldn't be able to make April. Probably the deadline for that is going to be the 24th if they wanted to make April of this month. So if assuming that the town wants to, depending on when you guys make that decision, is really when they can start doing the conditional use process, which that is probably in and of itself going to take a month and a half to do, because any decision the DRB makes has a 45-day appeal period. So you couldn't really do anything until that period has lapsed. In addition to that, I need about 19 days advance notice to get everything on the agenda, because I have to warn the meeting 15 days in advance. I have to prepare my staff notes, yada, yada, yada. And assuming there is more, there could be other applications as well. I'll need to do that for any of the other applications that we have on there. So if you are interested in having them do it sooner would be better, just because, we could be looking at mid-June, by the time we get through all just the permitting end of it, because after conditional use, they still have to come to me to get the zoning permit to put it in. There's another 15-day appeal period after that. The good news is if you guys want to go through this, once it's done at this point, and then they can seasonally take it in, take it out every year without having to come back and get a new permit. So
Thank you, Tyler. That's helpful. So as you can see, it's a couple month process for conditional use. So one suggestion might be proceed with the conditional use application and then have UMIAC come back if you want them to answer that question. So just because it's approved doesn't mean you have to install the ladder.
Right, but to approve it tonight for the sense of the select board, do we need a motion?
You would need because it's town-owned land, we would need a motion to go through the conditional use approval, and then essentially UMIAC would be the applicant. I would think we would waive fees because it's essentially a town application. And then you would move to that. And then if in the future you determine, no, UMIAC hasn't followed through, we don't want the ladder in there, you just say, we're not putting it in. But have UMIAC come back, maybe condition it to say, if approved through conditional use, you have to come back to ask to actually install the ladder. One solution.
Okay, Denise, go ahead.
Denise Barnard. Since UMIAC is here, and I didn't know if this would be something that your company would be willing to do, but we have a lot of families in our town that wouldn't be able to afford your what you do for other people in the state of Vermont. Would you be willing to possibly do a pass like Shelburne Farm does, or the Shelburne Museum, or the Echo that is held at the library, and a family can take that pass out for a day to use your services?
Yeah, I would certainly entertain something like that. The library pass would probably not be the one. It would probably be do a scholarship type arrangement.
Okay, or the community cares camp or something like that.
People in need that sort of stuff.
Right. And it just, I think Richmond's being incredibly generous to your company, and I would just like a little give back maybe.
Yeah,
If that would be-
absolutely. And one of the things we think that we're really helping the community at is by providing the shuttle. And people came to us saying, hey, can you please do a shuttle? There was already an existing parking issue and congestion. And by offering the shuttle system to a parking lot over Rocker Park, which isn't as busy as places up the
Right.
river.
And I
If
know
we're not
with
telling
that-
people they're parking.
A lot
Up
more
at-
trash has come too.
Mhm.
So a lot of trash has come.
Okay, Bard.
I was just going to point out, as somebody who's been up and down that bank in various locations, some of them easier and some of them more difficult. The use of this method of accessing the river is not restricted to customers of UMIAC.
No.
So that
anybody.
people have difficulty getting up and down from the river, if installed, it's there for use other than UMIAC customers. And there is a fair amount, increasing volume of traffic, I think,
Mhm.
in Overrocker, not really this time of year. I'm often there by myself, but in the summer it picks up. There's more like foot traffic, people walking, running along the path.
A lot of walkers and bikers.
Okay, we have another hand up, Kara.
Yeah, 2 points here. Point number one is I think that should be a condition that the town has to give permission on a yearly basis, not get a permit, but they have to go to the town manager to make sure it's okay. In case there was any problems in previous years, you don't want to have a blanket future can always do this, no matter if you're taking care of, if they're not maintaining the stairs and there's problems with the stairs, you have to have some recourse to be able to make sure they're doing business properly by installing and removing and those kinds of things. So you need a loophole there for yourself as the town. And the second piece that I want to point out is they are a commercial entity, like Denise is trying to point out. Just because it's town-owned property, they're still going to make a business and make money off of it. So the fee should not be waived for the permit. It's part of doing business to pay a permit fee. We all have to pay a permit fee in this town.
Okay, before I go to Tyler, any questions or comments from the board? Jeff?
Just that I see these as two different issues. I mean, what I'd like to do is act on the latter and schedule a time, maybe in a month or two, for you to come back after you've had discussions with other towns and report back, and we can figure that out. I think that the conditions that Kara are talking about can be worked out in the contract negotiation.
And I only bring the fee up because it's town-owned land, and typically, if the town's applying for a permit, the town doesn't also pay the fee for that permit, so.
Okay, Tyler? Oh, Tyler took his hand down. Okay, so do we need how should the motion be phrased to say, go ahead with the letter and proceed with conditional use?
I think proceed with conditional use for use of the ladder, but then if you want to condition that before ladder's installed, come back to the select board. That way, then they would know that we can proceed with conditional use. If it gets approved with conditional use before it gets installed, they have to have permission, in the board owning the land has the authority to do that. If this was their land, you couldn't do it both ways. Once they have conditional use, they would have the ability to put the ladder in, but the board can have authority to put the ladder in and then not put the ladder in.
Okay, so does somebody want to try stating a motion?
As far as the conditions, I don't think it needs to be attached to the permit. It can be within the contract, which we're going to have anyways because of the insurance.
Yeah.
So I move that we approve proceeding with a conditional use permit for a ladder to be installed on town-owned land by Umiak at Overrockers. How's that? Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, do I have a second?
No second.
Okay, second from Lisa. Any further
Stairs instead of a ladder?
stairs to the ladder?
Ladder just screams liability.
Well, next year we'll go with the escalator. If there's no other comment, are we ready for a vote? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Hard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda, hopping back into the order that we were previously following, is item D, which is consideration of approving a request to use $1,000 from the Conservation Reserve Fund for a panel discussion. So, Judy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, thank you. Judy Wasowski, Chair of the Richmond Conservation Commission. So the Andrews Community Forest is a beloved place in town, and there has been a desire to put bike trails in there. But there's been some recent research that shows the impact of trails, not just bike trails, but any kind of recreational trails on wildlife. And there have been some discussions on this subject. So we have been planning to have a speaker series, and I have to apologize profusely for not getting this request to you sooner. Just had a lot of stuff going on in my life. So we're just asking for money to compensate the speakers, some of whom, like Meredith Naughton, she's a real expert in this issue. So this will be a public meeting, and the money is basically to compensate the speakers for their time, and then additional expenses as they may come up. I just wanted to put a little extra money in there so we didn't have to come back and beg you to cover our costs. But I think this will be a good thing, and it's in advance of the Andrews Community Forest Committee's discussion about this subject. So it's all well-timed and fortuitous.
Okay. Josh, did you have anything you want to add to that? No. Okay, questions for Judy from the board? Jeff? So,
Judy, thank you for doing this. Clearly, this is an issue that needs a lot of public discussion. So like, how would you pay experts? Like, what kind of experts are you talking about? And what might their rate be?
We had thought maybe $200 per person. It's, for example, I'm the state entomologist. I get $100 for speaking at if I were able to accept money, I would have gotten $100 for giving a lecture in a class. So 200 doesn't seem unreasonable for somebody who's actually one of the leading, one of the people who's done many of the reports. Meredith Naughton is that, and then some of the other people are have worked with Forest and Parks or Fish and Wildlife and have a great deal of experience on managing this particular type of situation where you have multiple use on a well-traveled area. So that's experience that, you know, a layperson might not have. If somebody's actually been managing a site, they can bring information that, you know, would be of use to us as we make our way through this process.
Okay, Judy, thank you. Bard?
Judy, is it safe to conclude that since we're asking for $1,000 from the Conservation Reserve Fund, that this is not explicitly specific to Andrews Community Forest, thus it's not Andrews Community Forest Reserve?
That's correct, yes, and I should have made that clear. It may be applicable to that situation, but we have trails all over the town. And this is kind of new information, and it's a new discussion that's been taking place. I know they had a conversation like this in Randolph, and I just think it's helpful to, you know, give people a chance to hear from folks who've managed multi-use areas and just get a sense of the range of issues and some of the solutions. And, you know, we ask people to submit questions in advance, but there'll also be a question and answer period after the speakers, you know, give their thoughts in answer to the initial set of questions. So I think it will just be really helpful as the town moves forward in any kind of planning and recreational use to have a broader knowledge and understanding of what comes up in these situations. Does that answer your question, Bard?
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands from the Zoom or from the audience. Are there still any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one more question, Judy. So how will you coordinate with the Andrews Community Forest? They're having a meeting coming up this month?
Right. So yes, we sent them an invitation. We've been very transparent about, you know, what we're doing. I think it will be helpful to Andrews because it will just let people, I don't want to say get their yayas out. It will help people just ask the initial suite of questions around this issue so it won't all land on the ACFC to deal with. And again, this is more like a general conversation about recreation and wildlife. It's not location specific. You know, like the Long Trail, it's great. I'm not advocating ending the Long Trail, but we should be cognizant of the effects that these trails have. And maybe as we, you know, plan to expand recreational areas because of COVID, so many more people are recreating. We need to have a sense of what effect that has, and can we, sort of like with housing developments, you know, you can place them in certain ways that have higher impact or lower impact on the wildlife in that area. So similar kind of broad-based issue.
Okay, Judy, I would like to thank you. I think it's a reasonably safe bet that the phrase, I'm not asking them to get their yayas out, has been said at a select board meeting before. So let's, you know, make a note, March 13th, 2023. That said, is there any further comment or questions from the board or from the public? Okay, do I have a motion?
This is Bard. I move to approve the use of up to $1,000 from the Conservation Reserve Fund to pay for experts to participate in a panel discussion regarding conservation and trail-based recreation, including the impact of trails and trail use on wildlife.
This is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bard, a second from David Sanders. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Thank you.
And thank you, Judy. I look forward to the speakers. Okay, our next item on the agenda has to do with liquor and tobacco licenses. I'd like to ask our town clerk, Linda Parent, if she could come up and talk us through this. There have been a few changes about how this licensing works.
Well, it used to be that once a year I would get it on my computer and I get to print out everybody's license. You folks would, review them. I'd send all that paper back to Montpelier. They'd send me back some more to print out, and they aren't doing it that way. It's all electronic. Each restaurant or store is responsible for going online to the special site, filling out all the information. Then that gets sent to me. They have to personally bring in a check for however much is due the town of Richmond. And you folks, I think you saw in your packets that I made up some little forms for it, and I have copies of what they sent me. And then I have to take the minutes from this meeting, send them to Montpelier, and then they will send this license to the restaurant.
Okay, and at some point we dance the hokey pokey. Got it.
Just about it.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay, the license applications that we have before us tonight are for a second-class liquor license, a tobacco license, and a tobacco substitute endorsement for Cumberland Farms of Vermont. And I should note that for those of you who don't do this all year, Vermont has various liquor licenses. A first-class license is a license to serve beer and wine on site. A second-class license is a license to sell beer and wine to be consumed off premises. A third-class license is to serve spirits on site. And this does not, we don't get involved with the state liquor store at the market because the state does that one directly. But we have a second-class liquor license, tobacco license, and tobacco substitute endorsement. And even as I say that, I recall tobacco. We don't have a definition of what exactly a tobacco license is. I assume it's just a license to sell tobacco.
Yes.
Nothing fancy. Okay.
No, that's it. And then the endorsement they have to pay for is for the vaping items.
Okay.
That's the tobacco substitute. And we didn't used to have to do the tobacco. Next year, we may not have to do it. There was a line left out of a law at legislature, and that's why we have to do it this year.
Okay. So we're bringing up the Cumberland Farms document.
So Jay, this is David. I move to approve a second-class liquor license, a tobacco license, and a tobacco substitute endorsement for Cumberland Farms of Vermont.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This part, I will second that.
A motion from David, second from Bard. Okay, the license application is up on the screen. Are there any questions from members of the public here or at home, or members of the board? Anybody would like to comment or ask about this application? As you can see, there's information here about have they had violations? Have there been problems? In this case, they both say no. Any other questions you might have? Lisa?
One question, how do we know if there's a violation? I
They-
mean, who would we hear from? From you?
Yes,
Okay, and you would hear
liquor
from-
control would send it to me and then I would tell you.
So this is just a municipal procedural move. We don't have any oversight in enforcement or
No,
overseeing the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, Fire, everything.
right.
The state does the enforcement. We
Yes.
just literally stamp.
A few times we've gotten letters from them saying that such and such, served an underage person that caught in the sting.
Any other questions regarding the Cumberland Farms application? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the second-class liquor license, tobacco license, and tobacco substitute endorsement for Cumberland Farms, Vermont. Please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye. Bard, aye.
And J.I. Our second application is for AGS Vermont, Inc., doing business as Richmond Market and Beverage. And I thought it said in the memo, the state of Vermont licenses a Vermont liquor store directly, but now we're approving a license.
This is their.
This
This is their beer and wine license. Thank you.
Right.
That should have been obvious. Okay, we have a motion. We have a request for a second-class liquor license and a tobacco license for the market. Any questions, comments, or concerns from members of the public or the board?
This is David, so moved.
Bard, second.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion to approve a second-class liquor license and tobacco license for AGS Vermont Inc. doing business as Richmond Market and Beverage. Please state your
This is
name and
just
your
the
vote.
beer and wine. The liquor store is
Right,
handled separately.
just beer and wine. Okay, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye. Bard, aye.
And J.I. Our final license application is for a first-class liquor license for Sweet Simone. So that would be the license to serve beer and wine on site. The application is up on the screen. Any comments or questions from the board or members of the public?
I have one question relative to that. So, I'm thrilled that they want to do this. So this would be, my recollection before the pandemic, that they would have like, a once a
Dinners.
week evening thing. Cool. So they're thinking about doing that again.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
You have a question?
Oh, go ahead, Denise.
Can I just ask, why is the fee different for Sweet Simone's opposed to the other two?
Because the Sweet Simone's is a drink on the premises
Okay,
and the others are taken home.
okay, thank you.
First class versus second
Yeah.
class liquor licenses.
And the state sets the fees.
Okay. Any other questions?
So Jay, this is David. I move to approve a first class liquor license for Sweet Simone's.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Please, Bard, I will second.
We have a motion from David Sanders, second from Bart Hill, to approve a first class liquor license for Sweet Simone's. Any further comment? Being none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And J.I.
So one further question. So what about, the Lucky Spot?
I haven't got theirs yet.
They don't all happen at
They,
the same
they
time.
don't have, they aren't happening at the same time now. They're
Okay.
not.
By the same token, the Stone Corral,
Yeah.
I got 2 more today, so you'll have 2 more.
And
next week.
Papa McGee's as well. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And the pizza place, at the park, there's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Today's I got it for the mobile station in Stone's Throw.
Right.
so this is just, Lisa, this is one of the many fun aspects of being a select board member is controlling alcohol and it's been
I don't see we're controlling though.
Just being aware of it.
Being aware of it.
waving as it goes by.
I think it's our responsibility to try in every place, right?
Right. Okay, our next, so Linda, thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is item F, public hearing to consider amendments to the traffic ordinance. Information about the ordinance is in your packet. We have both the clean ordinance and the ordinance as marked up. And I believe Josh is bringing that up here on the screen. But before we can discuss it, I should not get ahead of myself. We need a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing to consider amendments to the traffic ordinance.
Please, Bard, I will second that.
We have a motion from David Sanders and a second from Bart Hill to open the public hearing. Any discussion on that motion? Saying none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. The public hearing is open and will ask Town Manager Josh Arneson to talk us through this.
One more procedural. thing.
Oh, I apologize. You're right. We have a second motion we need. We need a motion to forego reading the entire rule aloud, read only the title unless you would prefer to have the whole thing right.
This is Bard. I would like to move to forego reading the entire rule aloud and read only the title.
Do I have a second?
This is David, I'll second.
David sent motion from Bard, second from David. To forego reading the entire rule aloud, read only the title. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. And now Town Manager Josh Arneson will tell us about these changes to the ordinance.
Okay, so this is the Town of Richmond traffic ordinance proposed to be amended as follows. Section 6A, subsection A, subsection 3 removes parking restriction within the town highway right of way. Section 6A, subsection A, subsection 19.
Could you show us where?
Oh, yeah, geez, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm
That's
looking at
in there
my notes and let me let everybody follow along. All right, so we're at 6. So 6A.
Could you
Yep,
zoom?
zoom in.
Yeah.
Right. So here's 6A, A3.
Could you move the?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, I can-
I'm just being Mr. Fussy.
No, I'm just not paying enough attention. Okay, so I think all pieces are in order. So this was actually not originally proposed by the traffic committee, or the parking committee. But we caught this upon review that in this part, section 3 here, it says there's no parking on the travel portion of any town highway or within the town highway right of way, which would say that you couldn't park off of the travel portion of the road. And it's been our practice that if the car is parked off of the traveled portion of the road, that's a legal place to park. And if they're on the traveled portion of the road, then they get a ticket. I'm thinking here of specifically Dugway and Cochran as we are considering them this evening. So seeing that anomaly, discussed it with our road foreman, police chief, and our attorney. We didn't see any downside to removing that because the spirit of this is you can still be in the right of way. You just have to be off the traveled portion of the road. The next sections that we are proposing to add are in the same section. This is number 19. So this would be no parking, if the header is no parking along either side of Town Highway 3, Cochran Road, from the intersection with Town Highway 5, Duxbury Road to the Edmonds Bridge, which is the Huntington River Bridge, except where parking has been explicitly designated in the area off of the travel portion of the road on the south side of Cochran Road, immediately east of the Edmonds Bridge. So this would ban parking in that area with the exception of that small turnoff. People probably parked in over by Bombardier Meadow right before you get to the bridge coming from the Route 2 side. That would also ban it within the right of way. So not only off the travel portion, but even in the right of way. And then number 20 on the entire west side, uphill side, opposite side of Huntington Riverside of Town Highway 7, which is Dugway Road, from mile marker 0.5 south of Town Highway 3, Cochran Road, to mile marker 2.2 south of Town Highway 3 on Cochran Road. There again, it's the west side of Huntington Road as you're traveling south from Cochran Road. So your left-hand side.
Okay, and then there's one more item.
Oh, sorry, there is the fee. So the parking fine was previously $25 and it's proposed to increase to $50 to make it a bit more of a deterrent to actually get a parking ticket.
Okay, thank you, Josh. We have members of the parking committee on the Zoom call, and we have John Rankin from the parking committee here in person. John, do you want to speak to this or anybody from the committee who's on the call?
Well, so for on Cochran Road, it would leave a small amount of parking. For Cochran Road, it does leave a small amount of parking along the Bombardier Meadow side closest to the Winooski River Bridge. It's not ideal parking because there's a steep embankment, but it was sort of a compromise between safety and allowing some parking to remain, acknowledging that the Richmond Land Trust hasn't yet made a decision if parking would be allowed in forthgoing in the coming year in the Bombardier Meadow. But it would enhance safety as a thought, and line of sight was a consideration. For Dugway Road, that the greatest concern is when two cars are parked slightly in the traveled way or entirely in the traveled way across from each other, and there's some ambiguity to parkers as to whether they're in or out of the traveled lane. And by having this substantial section of Dugway Road where there is no parking on the uphill side, it would just be very clear that the people know you don't park on that side, and optimistically thinking that will reduce the situation where two parts are in the travel lane across from each other, narrowing traffic.
And reduce the likelihood of an emergency vehicle not being able to get through.
Yes, and then for number 3, I guess the thought is about the right of way is that many ordinances the towns have been written many years, over many years by many people, and there may just be some mistakes in them, and this appears to me to be a mistake.
Okay, thank you, John. Any comments, questions from the board? Oh, well, you're not, wait, she's not on the board. From the board first.
Oh, board, I'm sorry.
I have one question. I think people kicked around briefly, what the right dollar figure was for a violation, and I think there was strong consensus 25 was too little. Any comments about 50? Is that like the Goldilocks point, right? Not too much, not too little.
They've gone up to 100, I think. Some of them, I think the state side is 100 and the town side was 25, something like that.
I do recall, if I recall correctly, there are some that are significantly higher, 75, 100 bucks. So I just sort of pose that question.
David, did you? No, okay, Lisa.
What?
Well,
I'm fine.
okay, Jeff.
As far as that issue goes, think 100% increase is a good step in the right direction, and we can see how it works.
Right. It's at least getting it a little way away from the convenience fee aspect. Okay. Can you state your name or come to the? Yeah.
Andy Bissett.
Mhm.
This is an ongoing dilemma for the town. I don't know, because you want the recreation of money they brought into the town. Okay, but you need to provide adequate parking there for these tourists.
Okay, Andy, thank you. Denise, you want to come up?
Sure. Sorry.
Actually, it works over there.
Okay, right, you're right. There is a mic over her head, but she's so beautiful. I want her
Oh,
to stay closer.
After a long day. Denise Barnard, item number 19, clarification. So we have the 4 little spots by Miss Miller's house and the Edmonds Bridge. Are you talking about these 2 spots directly across the road on the right?
Are you talking about the exception?
Yeah,
So that is, it's the 4 pull-off sort of on the south side of Cochrane, right before you get to the bridge. Is that the?
so
Those
I
days
understand those
pull-off.
4 are there,
That's the.
but are
that's
you
the
saying
exception.
additional ones across the road?
Mm,
Is that what I heard? No,
No,
Yeah.
it's only those 4.
only those 4.
Explicitly designated in the area off the travel portion of the road on the south side of Cochrane Road, immediately east of the Edmonds Bridge.
Perfect. And nowhere else on that area.
Nowhere else within that zone, and we'll sign it appropriately to allow for that and show that there's no parking.
And I haven't been to parking meetings, just curious. I know a lot of people pull in, they think it's a pullout, so it prohibits other cars from parking there. And I was wondering if there's any way we could maybe do a yellow stripe just to let them know that 4 cars could park here. Because a lot of times people pull in and just drive in. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That seems reasonable.
How about signage?
Yeah.
You know,
They get one car there.
yeah, the ones park sideways and you can't park until they leave.
I think that's a good point. I have definitely seen that.
Not there. Yeah.
Lisa,
Yeah, John, did you guys ever
would
talk
you
about?
point the
signage?
mic at yourself?
Sorry. Did you guys talk about signage at all, for the parking? I mean, did you?
I think it was going to be coordinated with Pete Goslin.
Mhm.
And that new signage would be part of
Okay.
this, but
Pete does seem to
not
understand the
part of the
situation.
traffic ordinance.
Okay.
Okay, Denise.
And when the bridge was replaced, the Edmonds Bridge, placard was supposed to go back up. It was originally taken off during the construction. And to my knowledge, it's never gone back up. And I just asked that that be put back up. Does anybody know anything about it?
I had it in the vault
I know where it is.
and
Go ahead.
It's safe.
Sorry.
all I know is Karen took it and was gonna give it to Pete Gosselin on the.
Kara,
And Pete has it.
Kara, go ahead.
Pete, it has been, yes, it's Pete Goslin has it.
Okay,
And we had talked about ways to put it up so that it wouldn't be stolen. So we don't want to like just mount it and have somebody, oh, this is great. So we need to figure that out and get it up. I agree, it's a beautiful one.
David.
What's the plaque?
It says Edmonds Bridge and it's got the dates of,
And it,
George Edmonds.
it talks about George Edmond.
Yeah.
Might be able to find it. Interested.
Not at the Edmonds Tennis Bridge.
Right.
Well, the other side.
South side.
Great. There you go. I will share this for you. Talk about it.
Oh,
Suspense is killing me. There we go.
Oh. Oh, wow. Definitely, that should be.
Very nice.
wow,
So that was on the Iron Truss Bridge that was taken down? It was actually on the bridge?
No, on the cement one,
Oh,
over the Huntington River.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay, cool.
Um,
Jeff?
so is there any other comment? Can we close the?
Oh, I just want to check. John Cohn, you turned your camera on a second ago. Did you want to share something?
No, thank you. Just
Oh.
listening in case anybody, but John is there.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, I would like to point out that the memo has us closing the hearing regarding face coverings in indoor spaces. I think maybe
different, okay, so I
I'm
think,
in traffic ordinance,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes, so do we have a motion to close the hearing?
so I move to close the public hearing considering the adoption of the traffic ordinance as presented.
No, this is fixed.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff. Do we have a second?
I will second.
I think Bard got to it first, so we have a motion from Jeff, second by Bard. Any further discussion regarding closing the hearing? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Art, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, the item before us is now whether or not to adopt the amendments to the traffic ordinance.
So I move to adopt the amendments to the traffic ordinance as presented.
Bart, I will second it.
Motion from Jeff, second from Bard. Is there any further discussion on adopting the amendments to the traffic ordinance? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Art, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks for your work on this.
Okay, our next item of business is, I can close the liquor licenses. I think I'm done with those. Is item G, consideration of setting a hearing date for amendment to zoning regulations for Village Residential Commercial District and the Gateway Residential Commercial District and associated amendments. We have Planning Commission Chair Virginia Clark here. Virginia, would you like to come up and talk to us about this?
And if you could have the two maps available, Josh, we could show those. So, hello, good evening. I would like to just give a small introduction to this topic. There's a lot of materials here. All of the things that I'm going to say are covered in the packet and on the website. So if anyone wants to have kind of a summary, you could look at the memo to the select board. That's on there as well. Clean copy of the amendments and marked up copy of the whole zoning ordinance. We have two maps and we have the required bylaw reports that are required by the state when you're amending your ordinances. So, sure, you could do the first map,
Which is.
say the gateway, let's say.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so what we're doing here is we've made some continued progress in our goal, the planning commission's goal, to update and amend our zoning ordinance based on the 2018 plan that was adopted. So periodically, we should be going through the zoning ordinance and looking at all the districts, looking at the current problems, and trying to make some amendments. So the two districts that we're going to work on, that we have been working on, that you will be working on, are the Gateway, which is shown here in pink. So you can see I-89, the red line, and then Main Street on the other side of this pink area. This district was formerly known as the Gateway Commercial, or currently known as the Gateway Commercial District. In response to the lack of housing, we have wanted to open this area up, make it a little bit easier to have housing out here. So we've rebranded it as the Gateway Residential Commercial District, making it a mixed-use district. Residential, commercial is added both in there. So it's now called, we are proposing, the Gateway Residential Commercial District. The map is entirely the same, except on a previous occasion, you will recall, you all approved the change of the mobile station lot, which is at the top of this map beyond the pink, which we put into the commercial districts associated with exit 11. So there's industrial commercial across the highway, all of the commercial area around exit 11. We felt it was more suited to be in that district, so we removed it from the Gateway. The remainder of the Gateway is the same as it has been previously. So a couple of things that you can just note: the largest lot down sort of just below the middle, that's the land trust property. And right above that is the Willis Farm property. So that's about 10 acres, that Willis Farm, and that has been operating under a PUD to put commercial development there. So the rest of the district to the north of that is mostly residences, and then there's a couple of businesses, the Great Escape and so forth. So that's one district. We started to work on this district when there was a question of extending the water and sewer out here. That is unresolved. Still, our goal was to remove regulatory barriers in case there was water and sewer out here, that more housing especially could be put out here, but also so commercial businesses as well. In the course of looking at this district, we decided to work also on our other mixed-use district.
Virginia, before we switch to that, Bart has a
Yes.
question.
Just
All right.
a procedural question. Do you want to have discussions, go through everything and then come back to the start for questions and comments?
I kind of think we should do that, just to go through everything briefly, and then we'll put whatever we want back up for questions.
Okay,
So,
sounds good.
um,
Next map.
we have the other map. So we're looking at our other mixed-use district. By the way, this is excluding the Jonesville area, which we haven't really worked on yet, and we're may have a mixed-use district, but. So the village, which was this area in yellow, you can see here, it surrounds our little downtown area, the downtown block, which is the village downtown district. And we also have this couple of small commercial areas, Railroad Street and the Round Church Corners complex. What we wanted to do here, and we rebranded this, the Village Residential Commercial, to differentiate it from the now Gateway Residential Commercial. So we have these two residential commercial districts. We decided to consider them together because they have much in common. What we did was we expanded this district to allow for a little more commercial activity, more housing, some multifamily housing, not necessarily in the neighborhoods. So you can see that this yellow area is extending along the arterials, the main arterials coming into Richmond Village. West Main Street, we've extended it to Millet Street to include the Goodwin Baker Building. East Main Street was previously part of the residential commercial district. We have extended it up the Jericho Road to School Street and to the overpass. Because if we have very limited commercial space in Richmond for compatible commercial, so we might as well have it in places where it might succeed, which is along the arterials. And then we added a small area down near the Round Church Corners complex where Man and Machine is. What is below that in yellow was already part of the residential commercial district. We added those 5 lots on the other side of the street from the Stone Corral, Man and Machine, to just provide a little more space that could be compatible commercial, could have more residential uses, could have multifamily housing, for instance. So those are the areas, and they're all listed on your memo that we expanded the village district to. So one of the kind of ground rules that we had in talking about these two districts, and you can take the map down if you want or leave it up, but was that the planning commission was only going to talk about the districts that we were going to talk about. And we were only going to make changes to the whole of the zoning regulation to these two districts. This was to give people the ability to take this amount of information in. It was felt that doing the whole zoning document, doing all the districts at one time is too much for people. It's overwhelming for the planning commission as well as for everybody else. So the changes that we're talking about, you want to keep in mind, are just for these two districts. So the downside of doing it this way is that there are differences between these two districts and some of the other districts. And we will need to make sure that our DRB and our zoning administrator pay careful attention to the actual district that is being talked about here. So with our goal of trying to remove regulatory barriers to allow more housing, we've done several things. in both of these districts, we've increased the residential density that is allowed. That means the number of units per acre. We have raised it so that you could have more units per acre. We have moved some uses from conditional to permitted to make it slightly easier. So there are many barriers to making housing. One of them is the length and the expense of the process, the permitting process. So the easiest thing to do is just to get a zoning permit. If you have a permitted use, you can just get a zoning permit from the zoning administrator. If it's more complicated, you have to get a conditional use, you have to go through the DRB, you have to have hearings, there are more fees, et cetera. And then the most complicated is the PUD. So one of the ways to make it easier to have housing is to make the process a little easier, which means pushing some things from conditional to permitted or from PUD to conditional. So we have moved a few things that you will notice into the permitted category, such as an example is a 3 to 4 unit house or dwelling. So this is to allow in these two districts where you can have a house or a duplex, you can now have a 3 to 4 unit residential use.
Could you just bring that back up just for, I,
Yeah, no,
the
that's
document Virginia is alluding to is 137 pages long. I don't think you really
I'm
want
just
to discuss
talking about
on the map. Okay,
the
summary, right?
summary,
Okay.
the select board memo.
Right.
Yep.
Just however, for members of the public watching at home who are going,
Yep.
where's all this written down?
Okay,
I just wanted to, or you can say it.
sure. We can have the memo up there if you want, if people would
I just
rather
want
have
people to know
that.
what they're looking for when the time comes, because there's a
Yep.
lot of, it's a lot,
Okay.
there's a lot of stuff in.
So this is the explanation of the amendments.
Mhm.
So you can, that just tells you what we talked about.
I'm just saying, so in the, if people really want to know where to find all this.
Yeah.
It's gonna take 30 seconds. So if you go to the calendar and go to the select board.
Yep.
3/13/23, located in the packet, starting with 3G1 down to 3G7 is all of the information that Virginia's talking about this evening. So you can see the maps here. You can see the amendments in a marked up version so that you can go
Yep.
through it. And there's also a clean version, which is actually condensed quite a bit. And you can read through that, and that gives you a summary of all the changes. I'll go to the memo now, though, so you can walk through that.
Well, I'm not proposing,
Yep.
yeah, I'll shut up, go back.
So, and
Yeah.
the clean version is just how we want this document to look
Mhm.
when we're all done. The marked up version is if you want to see what was in there before and how it's changed, then you will go to the red line version.
Is this on the planning commission webpage as well?
It is on the planning commission's web page for 2/1 and 2/123 for our 2/123 meeting. And then the corrected maps are in the 2/15/23 meeting. So,
And we could take all of these documents, put on the planning commission page, so that, to your point, that's where people go for planning. Well, let's do
Yeah.
that. I'll make sure we do that.
so.
Right.
Either one of those.
I just wanted to make, so people watching this either now or
Yeah.
later. And this is not the hearing, this is
Right.
discussion of setting a date for the hearing. But if people are watching this going, what are these documents they're talking about now? They know where to look.
Yes.
I
And
think
it's going to be impossible for me to,
is-
it's impossible for me to talk about all the details
right.
because there's a lot of material here. So
She can give you a
15
really
minutes.
Good overview. And
Oh, I know she
that's what
can.
she's doing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can back it up with reading.
And you will have Lisa now on your board who has been through this whole process with the planning commission as a former planning commissioner. Okay, so right now I'm just skimming through this memo. You can scroll down a couple of pages. Okay, that shows, that's talking about the maps. You can keep going. So now we're talking about some amendments that are for both of these residential commercial districts because they're similar in their style. So I'm on this low page here, talking about increasing in residential density. Allowing the zoning administrator to review, that's the permitted use. Allowing buildings with 3 to 4 dwelling units to be a permitted use, so there will be less of a process. And by the way, there are several bills right now in the state legislature that are mandating this.
Mhm.
So we're a little bit ahead of the curve. The state has tried to encourage towns to loosen up so that they can have more housing. it hasn't worked, the persuasion, so they're going to mandating. So we'll see where those go. We're also allowing buildings with 5+ units to be a conditional use. So the DRB would have to review that. If someone had the amount of land that allowed for 5 residential units, then the DRB's process would kick in for them to apply for a conditional use. So, for instance, in the gateway, if, for instance, the Willis property wanted to put a multifamily building on their property, let's say 10 units, this would enable them to do that through the conditional use process. All right, and to make sure that these multifamily housing, which is kind of new for us to allow a lot of multifamily housing, Jolene Court introduced it obviously, but we have put in our proposals that we adopt a set of multifamily housing development standards. This is to make multifamily buildings good neighbors, and to make sure that people have the amenities that they need who are living in those buildings, that we're not just warehousing people, but that we're making sure that they have nice places to live. We negotiated a lot with the affordable housing people who feel that this is too much, that this is going to make affordable housing expensive, but we wanted to be sure that our foray into multifamily housing didn't result in negative feelings about it. So we wanted to put these multifamily housing development standards in. Okay, we're also proposing that we have multi-use buildings, which means you can have residential and commercial in the same building. This is like we attempted to do with Jolene Court. Ground floor commercial, residential above. At the moment, it's not a very popular in terms of getting financing for it. It's not a very popular style of building, but it's a very traditional Vermont thing, is that you can have business on the bottom, residential on the top. So we're proposing to allow that. And then we have, in both of these districts, we are proposing that we have 2 categories of retail, pharmacy, or grocery store. One is large and the other is village scale. We were very concerned about scale and concerned about what might be put in the gateway if we didn't have some guardrails. We are only allowing village scale versions of retail, pharmacy, and grocery store in these 2 districts. So don't be thinking our grocery store is too big. It's bigger than 5,000 square feet, because that is in the commercial district. It's in the village commercial district, and we will want to allow larger scales there. But in these districts, we have restricted the square footage to 5,000 square feet of floor area. And this is one of the ways that we are attempting to discourage the big boxes from coming to the gateway. Okay, and we have a couple of others that we can talk about. We've also put in some design standards, some site and building design standards that is going to help keep the village looking nice and scenic. So in terms of the gateway, things that are specific to the gateway, and our concerns here were to keep it a scenic corridor and to discourage the big boxes from coming. So we put in some design standards, such as the bigger setback out in the gateway, the fact it has to be vegetated, no parking between the building and Route 2. And then we have put these guardrails around the big boxes, which I can briefly mention. One of them is the size. It has to be small. The second one in the gateway is that there's no retail allowed, except for minor retail that might be secondary to another business. We have the standards with the grass in the front, the big setback. We have a sign ordinance that doesn't allow for giant signs. It's impossible to actually prohibit big boxes by name. So we are just putting up these guardrails that's going to make it not useful for them to be putting big boxes here. And we have also added language into both of these districts that allows the DRB to assess the character of the area. And it says that we're interested in maintaining our entrepreneurial economy here in the village. So that language, while it's not a regulation exactly, we are allowing the DRB to look at that language and decide if what is being proposed, say for conditional use, doesn't comply with that. Okay, and we've also in the gateway restricted the number of curb cuts to the number that are already there. So it's not going to become a commercial strip with lots and lots of curb cuts. The village residential commercial district. So, you know, the concern there was, can we have more density and still have it compatible residential and commercial uses? This is a place there where there is water and sewer, so it's ideal for gentle infill, which is just increasing the density a little bit. We've allowed more building per lot, so increase the lot coverage. We've moved the setbacks out a little bit. We have allowed for ADUs, the accessory dwellings that can be put, a second unit can be put on a lot. And we have also added a clause that allows for 2 residential structures to be put on a lot. This is new for Richmond also, like the multifamily. But if you picture it as being a duplex, but just the 2 halves aren't connected to each other. We already allow duplexes on a lot. Now we are saying you can have a duplex, but you can actually have 2 separate buildings. You don't have to connect them with a walkway or some little structure or make them right next to each other. You can put a second unit. However, you do have to have the room. You have to have the space. There's a minimum lot size and a density requirement. So they're not going to go up on every tiny lot because you do have to have the space and the density. And we've added some building and site standards to help retain the traditional village appearance, the character of the area. So, okay, we have I just have a few more things to say. So those are the specific changes to the 2 districts. In the course of making these 2 district changes, we had to bring in some other amendments to make it compatible with the rest of the document. And some of the changes are going to apply to the whole document, only a few. Mostly they're specific to this district. The multiple uses and principal structures on a lot, looking at these 3 up here, is probably the one that's the most different, which is allowing 2 principal residential, only residential structures on a lot. The other ones are housekeeping, more or less. The site plan review. So one of the other barriers to development is the fact that every use in our current zoning, besides single family houses, has to go to the DRB anyway, even if it's a permitted use, to have a site plan review. We feel that we have an experienced zoning administrator. We pay for zoning administrators to be trained. We are going to allow them to do some of the site plan reviews. So it doesn't mean they're not going to have a site plan reviewed. It's just not, they're not going to have to go through the DRB process. And there's only a few of those anyway. The parking table. So our previous planner, Revy, was very interested in correcting the parking table. It was full of errors. It included a lot of businesses of kinds we don't have anymore. It didn't include the businesses we had. So he felt we should revise it, which we did. One of the other barriers to housing is excessive parking, and the mode in planning at the moment is to not use up so much of your land for parking. So in the parking table, there are some areas where we have reduced the minimum amount of parking, but that's just the minimum. A few of them, we have added maximum parking to try to hold off on excessive use of the land for parking. And Revy gained the information on the parking table from looking at a lot of other ordinances and planning documents. So, you know, I don't think either Lisa and I are going to be able to talk very much about the specifics of the parking table. We did look at it, but it's taken from other documents. We added the multifamily housing development standards. This is to make the multifamily houses into good neighbors. And then we changed some of the definitions. You can mostly they are most of the interest is in the new definitions. The most important ones are the grocery store, large scale, village scale, the pharmacy, large scale, village scale, and the retail, large scale and village scale. In the village RC district, we're allowing all three of those village scale, retail, pharmacy, and grocery store. In the gateway, we're only allowing the pharmacy and the grocery store.
And Virginia.
The other thing that we have done to help avoid the food desert problem. The food desert problem is the fact that the big boxes or the little boxes, which are the cousin of the big boxes, come into an area, they have lots of processed and packaged food, and they end up driving your grocery stores out. So we have set up a system where any pharmacy, retailer, or grocery store that sells over 2% of their floor space to food has to sell 25%, has to devote 25% of their floor space to perishables, fresh food, produce, frozen, refrigerated. So essentially, we are saying in Richmond, we don't want stores that have between 2 and 25% of their floor space in food. And the attorney is good with that as a way of reining in the little boxes and not letting the Walgreens with its extensive packaged food section come and take the share, the market share of people buying food. So anyway, I think that's it. I think I've used up my 15 minutes.
Yes, but thank you. I would just like to stress, as Lisa knows, as Virginia knows, an enormous amount of work went into discussing this stuff. There were whole meetings that were on the subject of how much square footage had to be reserved for perishable food. And I'm very grateful for the work you put in. Now, tonight, we obviously we're going to have some questions, but I just want to stress tonight, this is not the hearing.
Yep.
This is to answer questions, but then ultimately what we're going to do is receive the proposal and then possibly set the dates for the hearing.
This is a little introduction, and so I hope what people will do, everybody, is to look at this information and to talk about it and to bring questions. So, yep.
So I have sort of two. The first one's probably pretty simple for the ADUs.
Yep.
There's a lot of momentum there
Yes.
at the state level. Can you remind us what the sort of size parameters of ADUs are? Like how big they are?
Yes. So they have to be smaller, obviously, than the principal residence that they're
ADU is-
associated with.
Auxiliary development,
Accessory dwelling.
accessory, right?
Yes, so ADU means accessory dwelling unit, and this was the mother-in-law apartment.
Moved
And
out of the house.
you can
Like the
either
garage,
have it
yeah.
within a residence, you can have it freestanding, not in a residence. And this was something that the legislature actually mandated a while back that you had to allow. However, in the definition of accessory dwelling unit, they put a lot of words that we didn't feel that we could change, which is why we allowed for the 2 residences on a lot. It has to be a relative, and the owner of the property has to either live in the ADU or in the principal relative, in the principal structure. The square footage is, I don't remember, but it's like a third or something. It's small, so it has to be small. Yeah, it's proportionate to the other building. It has to be small and it has to be inhabited by the owner or a relative of the owner, one or the other, which I don't think Richmond checks on ADUs. And how would you ascertain that? And also, what if your relative dies and you want to rent it out or something? The way it was written seemed kind of restrictive in ways that you couldn't really even control or enforce. So,
Or how do you define relative?
yeah, well, they defined it. It was like, they laid it, it's in the ordinance, your mother, father, brother, anyway. So we felt rather than try to fuss with the definition of ADU, we would just allow 2 freestanding residences.
And have done with it.
So,
Brilliant. So first, thanks for that. The second one, as I think having had some conversations with, I use this word somewhat injudiciously, affordable housing.
Yep.
Sort of organizations, and that means different things at different times to different people. But one of the things that I've heard from some of the principal organizations of nonprofit perpetually affordable is the scale and infrastructure. So one of the things that we heard is you got to have water sewer on site, which clearly then pushes you in certain directions in the town. And for senior disabled housing, you got to have sidewalks, and sidewalks, not like, 30-degree sidewalks, but plausible sidewalks.
Mhm.
So that's just a comment about affordable housing. But another thing that they said, is they both had scale observations, like they're not into building, 3 units here, 2 units over there. They were talking scales that are more like 24 to 30 units on a site, not necessarily in the same building, but on the same location. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, especially related to the issues of density, lot coverage, units per acre, and any contemplation of density or some kind of bonus for perpetually affordable housing.
mhm. Well, we didn't this time around take up the density bonus question. We took it up extensively with Jolene Accord, and we weren't able to come to any kind of satisfactory resolution about density bonuses. That is a whole topic unto itself. In terms of the density question, we feel that we compromised between what the affordable housing people would like and what we heard and knew was the sentiment of the people who lived here, which was to not excessively increase the density. So we have allowed for a density of 8 units per acre, which is not going to allow you to make a 30-unit building on a 1-acre lot, which the affordable housing people suggest is useful to reducing the cost of housing. And we are not suggesting that you allow 80 to 90% lot coverage, which means you can build on 80 to 90% of the lot, which is what the affordable housing people suggest is actually going to reduce the cost of affordable housing. So we have gone from a 40% lot coverage, so your buildings can cover 40% of your lot. We have gone to 60%. And that was what we felt was a compromise. So we are not necessarily, it's going to require some creative effort to have affordable housing in Richmond. We don't have the sidewalks, so we need an official map that lays out the sidewalks before we really can have sidewalks. We have suggested in this proposal that sidewalks be placed whenever feasible, but that was about the best we could do, we thought. Water and sewer? No. If we take it to the gateway, we may have some space out there, but we don't know if it's going to the gateway. There aren't very many places, directions that you can expand the water and sewer system from Richmond Village. And it needs to be, you know, any affordable housing should really be close to the center of town.
Mhm.
Even if you have sidewalks, people don't always walk. We need some walking training too, because I was talking to someone from Richmond Terraces the other day. Richmond Terrace, slightly up Thompson Road.
Mhm.
Mostly they don't walk to the village. It's considered walkable. It's affordable housing for senior and disabled. They don't walk there. So,
Oh, sure.
you know, unless people actually walk there, then there's sort of no point in having sidewalks. And the scale is the question of, is it village scale? You know, can we make things that are village scale that have enough units to be interesting to the affordable housing people? So we've liberalized the ordinance in the direction of removing some regulatory barriers, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have got to a place where we're going to have a lot of affordable housing. Subsidized senior, you know, we'll need the sidewalks, or public transit. We don't have any public transit here. So it's kind of an ongoing question, I think. What is the right scale for the village? And so we compromised somewhere in between.
Okay, questions from the board? Jeff, Lisa?
I'd only make a comment that, like, this is a huge amount of work that the planning commission has done over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
I really appreciate that they're taking it in sections. Last time we took the whole zoning ordinance, we were not successful, I'll say. The document that Virginia put together is like extremely useful. So instead of having to go through that 136 page document and trying to understand more if you include the strikeout and red line, it's really helpful. So for the public, you know, if you want to know what this is about, the summary is excellent.
Mhm.
And it is, it's the Cliff Notes version.
Can I add something? The sections, the header sections, each of the ordinance sections they speak to the character of the district. And it's important to read that first, then look through the details.
Mhm.
And remember that the character of the district is what we're trying to accomplish with those, you know, lot coverages, setbacks, all those things. And the definitions also that are in the, I guess the precursor or the preliminary portion of the ordinance also apply to all the districts. It doesn't mean that all those definitions will be used in every section, but if they are, two definitions. So they should all continuity.
And as we go through the districts, we intend to put that purpose and features section, which describes the character of the district, into each one, which it isn't at this point, but that's part of our updating it and modernizing it.
Okay. Okay, for those of you watching the screen, you can, I don't think we have anybody coming in via phone, but Judy Rosofsky from the Conservation Commission.
Mars.
Huh?
Sorry.
Mars. Incredible effort from the Planning Commission, complicated issues and difficult to balance radically different goals and stakeholders. Thank you, Virginia, for your succinct summary of how the Planning Commission tried to meet many needs. Okay, so this is, of course, not the hearing. This is the presentation to the select board of the changes, and whether we set a hearing tonight or not, we do need to formally receive the proposal. There is a draft motion in the memo. Would somebody be interested this time in making that motion?
Do we need to?
Yes, you do.
All the numbers?
That you put into your motions?
Yes.
That's how you're supposed to do it, right? Here's what I did. I mean, this is, because that's already, you always did it too.
Art says he'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bart, I move to receive the proposal to amend Richmond zoning regulations, sections 2.5.2, 3.1.1, 3.1.2, 3.2.1, 3.2.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5.1, 3.5.2, 3.6.1, 3.6.2, 3.7.1, 3.7.2, 3.8.1, 3.8.2, 3.9.1, 3.9.2, 3.10.1, 3.10.2, 4.5, 5.5, 6.12, 6.1.2, 6.13, and 7, including minor references related to the district name change, which have been amended in the following additional sections. Table of contents, 2.1, 5.7.3, 5.7.4, 5.12.2, and index. Also including the revised official zoning map and its legend.
Yeah.
Nice reading of
Oh,
the
I'll
numbers.
second that. That was. really
Yeah.
good.
Okay, we have a motion from Bard and a second from Jeff. Any discussion before we vote?
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of those numbers are because we changed the name of these two districts. So every time throughout the zoning ordinance that the old name was referred to, we had to put in the new name. So that's where a lot of those numbers come from.
Okay. That'll go away too. And seeing no hands on the Zoom, no hands here in the room. If you're ready for the vote, go ahead and state your name and your vote.
This is David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Now,
We said.
we do have a hand up. Kara, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I did have my hand up and I thought you were only asking for comments from the board to begin with. Just a couple of questions. Virginia, the one thing that I didn't hear and you might have addressed it and I might have just missed it. You talked about a lot about the big boxes and the little boxes with grocery stores, et cetera, and with retail. I didn't hear restaurants. Has something changed with restaurants?
So restaurants, we elected not to restrict, Kara.
So restaurants are now going to be allowed out in the gateway more than what they were restricted before, but now restaurants will be allowed in the gateway, commercial?
At the gateway. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one pretty big change.
Yeah.
Not that I'm opposed to it or for it. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know where that stood.
So in the uses, if you look at the different uses, there are some changes there in
Okay.
the uses that are allowed. And so I didn't really have time to go over every one, but you can look at
Well,
them.
I know retail and restaurants were always listed together when anybody had talked about it. So that's why I just asked that question. And
Yeah.
the last thing is, I think is there a reason why this isn't going in front of the voters with as large a change as it might be that's being proposed? Is this only in front of the select board for this next public hearing for a vote?
Well, I guess that's really up to the select board to decide whether it's large enough change. You know, it is not nearly anywhere nearly as large as the change that took place in 2012 when the whole document went to the voters.
No. And I'm not insinuating that whatsoever, but it sounds like new districts are being defined. New larger uses or different uses are being allowed. And for the select board, who has been for the past 2 years pushing hard to talk about affordable housing, my only concern is that the planning commission's version of compromising might be not enough for the select board because the select board wants to see affordable housing. And so I'm just trying to see what the fine line is there between having it go to the select board and the select board can at the very last minute make a change and approve it, because that's what happened the last time the select board approved changes in the gateway. And those changes that they withdrew had to do with restaurants and retail from a planning commission recommendation. So I just want to make sure what the process looks like going forward. If it's just a public hearing that the select board is going to vote on and they can make changes at that public hearing, we have to be ready for the understanding that they could change some things to allow affordable housing, to encourage affordable housing more than what the planning commission was encouraging. Because the planning commission is not encouraging a level of affordable housing that affordable builders are going to do.
Yeah, so I guess my feeling about that, Kara, is that the changes that we have made are not substantial enough to warrant it going to the voters. but you could certainly bring that point of view forward at the public hearing and see how the select board feels about it after they've had, more time to hear from folks and to look at the documents. So,
Okay, so thank you, Kara. The item before us is, the item is still before us. We have now a question of, do we want to warn public hearings? In the memo, it's noted that we can do one hearing to discuss both districts. We can do 2 hearings, one for each district. Apparently, if we wanted to do 2 hearings, they could still be held on the same night. I'm not sure procedurally if there's a benefit to doing them as separate hearings.
so, yeah, so we had certain reasons why we held 2 different hearings on the 2 different districts.
But on the same night?
Yeah, they were run consecutively.
Oh,
We
you're
ran
right.
the 2 public hearings consecutively on the same nights, but for you all, though, some of those considerations aren't necessary. So my recommendation would be, unless you wanted to separate them, and the only downside of separating them into one public hearing on the gateway and one on the village is that many of these other amendments overlap. A lot of the definitions apply to both districts, so, it's probably better to run them together and to go to a second one, to continue it to a second one if you wanted to do that, if more people had things to say, but, that's kind of up to you.
So, if we wish to hold a public hearing, we, as the memo says, we have to hold it not less than 15 nor more than 120 days after the proposal is submitted to the board. And if we would like to set a hearing date, the earliest date that can be set is April 17th. So what is the board's will on this?
So it looks to me like the motion is to receive the proposal. It's not to set a date. Is that correct?
Well, we just received the proposal. We have the option of now setting a date.
Okay.
Just a point of order, the published agenda, item G, is consideration of setting a hearing date for amendment to zoning regulation, et cetera.
It would seem to me, another item on our agenda is looking at our year. We have a variety of things that we need to do. I wonder if it makes any sense to look at that. My guess is that, contrary to some of our other ordinances that we have hearings on, this one might take some time. This would probably be, long, agenda item, at least an hour, I would think, for both of these, maybe longer. So, I think it would be prudent to think about where it fits with our other work. The earliest we can do is April 17th. Is that my understanding?
I agree. I think we should give it the time, given the amount of time the planning commission has spent on this, I think it behooves us to move it forward, not, with all due diligence, but expeditiously, rather than sit on it, having our volunteers and staff spend a lot of time on it. I think I'd like to move it forward. And to Karen, other points of the conversation here, setting the hearing date is a hearing, and then I would say the way we is also a decision about, are we going to put it out to a vote or not? May as well, call that question explicitly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree a lot. I mean, there's momentum, so we need to keep that.
Okay. So do we wish to set a date? And if so, what date?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So do we think April 17th? I think it's a question.
Well, here's my question. If we do an April 17th, that's a regular select board meeting. Do we want this to be a meeting unto itself?
Yes.
Just so not the 17th. So either the 17th, we discuss nothing that night but this, or we pick a third or a second or fourth. What do you guys think?
Yeah, we'll probably have to continue the hearing is my feeling. There'll be questions that come up that we'll have to get answers to, good answers, and come back. So
I would just suggest if you set a separate night, don't do it on a regular select board night. I would say maybe an off Monday, like.
No, that's what I'm saying is.
Oh, sorry, you had said maybe do the 17th.
No, that's the earliest, but I'm saying, and that's a third Monday.
Right.
We could do the 24th,
Well,
which is a fourth. Go ahead.
no, I think I'm just looking at the calendar. You might be able to get it. did the 10th, we got it into the paper on the 22nd. That gives us 2 weeks of notice. So you could do April 10th. I said 17th at the earliest, meaning that's the.
Earliest regularly scheduled select board,
Correct.
but not the earliest possible.
Not the earliest possible date, because I would still give you 15 days to warn it and 15 days since you received it. You could do it April 10th.
I
like that.
I'll be out of state starting the
Yeah.
16th for a while, so the 10th would work well for me.
Okay,
Yeah, I like the 10th. I'll be out of town on the 24th.
I'm not going anywhere.
okay. Lisa?
I'm open, so.
Okay, so it sounds like having a hearing on the 10th would work. And is that a hearing to hold, one hearing to review both?
I think that would work.
Yeah.
Okay, can I have them, my state
It'll help
motion?
people retain.
Right, right,
what they
totally
heard like
agree.
10 minutes ago instead of 10 days ago, so.
Okay, so I move that we have a hearing on the proposed zoning changes. For all of the proposed zoning changes, but let me finish the motion and we can talk. On April 10th.
This is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, Jeff Ford, a second from David for April 10th.
Denise has a question?
Denise has a question.
I just, thinking ahead, when you warn it, I assume it will not be in this room. It'll have to be in a larger venue. Is that true?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think that makes sense.
Maybe the library would be,
Well, that's gonna add complications. So now we have to figure out a room. So I don't know that we could do that tonight and know what rooms are available.
Or Camel's Hump Cafeteria?
Why don't we
I don't
shoot
think
for
we
the
can
date
shoot
and
the
time
date.
and then work on a venue separately?
I think we can do that.
I recognize in one possibility is will it be hybrid and we'll encourage people to be hybrid. If it's in this room, for instance.
Okay. Well, I think, Josh, if you could research what rooms are available on that date and get back to us, because our next meeting is in a week. We have time to,
We
need to be able to warn it.
Because we have to get it into the paper, so we would have to kind of have that to the paper by probably Monday afternoon. To get it
Okay.
in at the, just
So
being
can-
conservative,
so can we just say, Josh, find the best room that works on that date and move on?
Yeah, since it'll be warned, I think that would work, right? Yeah, because it'll get warned in the paper, we'll figure it out. So what would you consider? Library?
Library,
Camel's
Camel's Hump, Camel's Hump would be
Your
good.
barn.
A little chilly this time of year and it's full of furniture at the moment.
Not low current.
Excuse
Okay.
me, Jay, wherever you're gonna have it, will you make sure you have the Zoom capabilities for the meeting, the public meeting?
Okay, that goes, yes, Kara, thank you. That goes without saying, I think, but yes, we definitely will make sure to do that. Meetings at night are not always easy to attend in person.
Thank
for a lot
you.
of- And
Thank you.
It could be the elementary school as well. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we have lots of spaces.
It's just,
And just a comment to Kara's comment, we have talked about the principle of maintaining hybrid participation
mhm.
in an open-ended way. So I think
Right.
that's something we should be doing universally.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it makes it meetings much more accessible and inclusive.
I guess my only concern is, well, I'll try to figure it out. I got like 3 days to figure out a room and MMC TV and Zoom. All right, I'll
We'll find
I'll
it.
try to figure it out.
So if we find a glitch that you can't solve this week, we can bring it up again next week.
And pick up,
Make
push it out further to a date that people will be here.
Yeah,
Okay,
we have to.
okay. So thank you, Virginia. I very much appreciate, and Lisa and all the planning commission members near or at sea. Thank you so much. This is a ton of work.
Yeah,
Ton of work.
thanks so much.
There's more to come. coming up.
More to come, yep.
Marshall,
Could I request of the select board, if they are now considering the next items on the agenda, to ask to review items L and M next, because the folks pulling the folks in the room, those are the items that they're involved.
okay, so we have a proposal to move items L and M in front of items I, J, and K. Is this the select board? I'm seeing thumbs up.
Sure.
Okay, so our next item of business will be item L, discussion of petition to hold a vote to consider moving town meeting day to the first Tuesday in March. Let me scroll forward. Okay, so for those of you who were present at the polls at Camelson Middle School last Tuesday, there was copies of petition available for voters to sign their names to petition the select board to consider moving town meeting back to all happening on Tuesday and no longer having a Monday night aspect to it. And the petition is included in the packet. Josh, I'd like to ask you to comment on the items that you summarized in the memo for everybody.
So petition came in. And then
He's gonna bring it up, yeah.
Yeah.
How many signatures are on the petition?
180,
And we needed to have 135 to
165.
165.
So we had more signatures on the petition than we had participants in Monday night.
That is correct.
That is correct.
Interesting thing to note.
Just say.
That is interesting.
So
Okay,
according to the petition, it was 189, 165 are needed. The petition came in worded as such, shall the Richmond Selectboard be requested to include the following question on the November 7, 2023 ballot? Shall the town of Richmond vote to change the day town meeting is held to the first Tuesday in March pursuant to 17 VSA 2640B to be voted by Australian ballot? So my first consideration was the request to have it by Australian ballot. And when we had voted, or when the town voted to move a town meeting day from Tuesday to Monday, it was actually done by Australian ballot. After that vote was done, it was brought to our attention that, should that have been done by voice vote? At that time, I reached out to our attorneys to ask the question, did we mess up the procedure? So our attorneys asked if we had ever voted to move public questions to Australian ballot. And I remember conferring with Linda, and at the time, no, we had not. Evidence of that is that the budget is still voted by Australian ballot. So at that time, the attorneys advised that the select board adopt a resolution to ratify that vote, essentially saying that there was no ill intent. It was done with the best intentions. It was put forward in the select board meeting to put it onto the Australian ballot. People had time to talk about it. It went to Australian ballot. It passed. So the board was essentially ratifying that, saying, yes, we should have done the other procedure, but we're going to ratify this because we felt that we were basically being transparent with it in the public board. So bringing us to this, in order to change the town meeting back to Tuesday, we would have to have a voice vote at either a regular town meeting or a special meeting called for that purpose. Another option would be to call a town meeting or a special meeting or go to town meeting to vote to put this question on Australian ballot. I reached out to VLCT to see if either of those options would be appropriate. VLCT advised that because the petitioners are asking specifically for an Australian ballot and specifically for this question to be asked, the board cannot put in front of that a question to the town via voice vote to ask the question by Australian ballot. So the VLCT advised that you got to ask the question. It should be by voice vote because that's the way the town is legally able to proceed. So I'll take questions. I see some quizzical faces.
Members of the board?
Aye.
Oh, well, played.
I hope it wasn't that confusing.
That's correct. So just for a point of clarity, that implies but does not explicitly state that the select board itself could not generate that question. We want to move from Monday to Tuesday.
So if the select board itself generated the question, then I think you'd have two paths. If there was no petition, you could say, let's hold a voice vote to ask to move the Monday to Tuesday, or you could say, let's hold a voice vote to put that onto an Australian ballot at a date to be determined, and then ask the question via Australian ballot. But the wrinkle is that the petition asks for it to be asked via Australian ballot, so you can't put the question to put it on Australian ballot in front of asking the question. This is how it's been explained to me by the LCT.
Jeff? So, as I understand it, we did this incorrectly the first time,
Right.
correct? Okay, so is that invalid? Could we say that was not a valid thought.
The
And
vote wasn't
therefore,
on.
and therefore, hold on, so, and therefore, we go back to our regular procedure, which would be the first Tuesday in March as a regular meeting. And at that meeting, ask the question. Shall we do this? Shall we continue to meet on the first Tuesday in March? You see where I'm going with
I
this?
do.
Is it-
The principle is that the first vote
one
was
wasn't-
flawed, so it's vacated by
Right.
its flaw, and it reverts to the previous state.
And therefore, then we wouldn't need to have a special meeting?
So does that mean that the Monday meeting we held was illegal and that nothing decided was?
No, I mean, that's all
So-
water over the dam.
I can follow up with VLCT or our attorneys on that question. To get to their.
And
their
wouldn't that
answer.
fulfill the
but-
intent of the?
Yes, can we withdraw the petition?
Yeah.
So,
would that
and
fulfill-
the
So,
other,
can I just real quick here? I don't know the specific answer to that. I think it's a legal question that we need to ask. My initial thought on that is that because the select board put a ratification together to ratify that, I don't know that you can then unratify it because it was voted on, it was ratified.
It was an error, but we fixed
It
it.
was an error, but it was fixed. So I don't know that this board could then undo something that the select board did 3 years ago. I can ask the question. I can certainly
Okay.
find out, but that's
I
my,
also
that's my
think
initial
that
reaction.
means the first Tuesday following the first Monday.
I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think town meeting's the first Tuesday.
That's
following
true.
the first
And
Monday.
they asked for the first Tuesday irregardless.
Oh.
Bad people, bad.
Oh my God.
I
May I have a turn to speak?
Yes, Marshall.
Thank you. I hope we're all in agreement that the intention of the petition is clear.
Yes.
And by the fact that we had a pretty strong response from our community that speaks for itself. One just step back observation and that those of us that put together the petition, as we now discover, had it worded in a way such that there are issues with it. And it perhaps was done because the last time we did this was by Australian ballot.
Right.
So
Right.
we're trying to comply with what the town's doing.
Right.
It'd be useful in the future if there was a vehicle so that if that would help anybody out there who's thinking about petitions to review it with some of perhaps our town attorney, what have you, to avoid this kind of thing in the future. Is that reasonable?
Sure.
And attorney.
Yeah.
And
I would say that
I
We can't call
am
the
not
town
entirely
attorney.
comfortable saying that our town attorney should be paid by the town to consult on wording of petitions
I
by
see.
citizens.
Okay.
But I think it suggests that any petition get attorney review in advance.
and one other thing that we didn't want the town to, expenses to incur was to have this Australian ballot at a special election. We
Right.
didn't want that to happen either. So we were trying to, just piggyback on another election that the town has coming up and not add any additional expenses
Right.
to our town.
So
Is
we
there-
have not warned a
Okay.
vote in November.
I know.
That's
So,
gonna be my question.
yeah. Regis.
No, I was gonna say what Jeff said.
Okay, anything else? Lisa?
And the reason that we came up with this is because the count that the JPs made in the beginning of the meeting was 145 people, give or take. And because it's a little hard when people are moving around to make sure you didn't count somebody twice. Then at 8 o'clock, we hadn't voted yet. People started leaving. And so that's where it came up with 130 passed actually voted.
Mhm.
And then Tuesday morning, we got people coming in there at 8:45, and it's like, where's the town meeting?
Oh, that was yesterday.
Exactly. And not that I don't figure out these things myself, but it was quite difficult to get people to come Monday night and then come back and work again Tuesday.
There
So,
was one particular person who wasn't there Monday night, but did show up 2 minutes before the polls.
That is correct.
okay, so long story short, though, question was made, can we withdraw the petition? If the petition was withdrawn, the select board could then, sensing the will of the voters to at least consider the question, we could then call a special town meeting instead of having to do a warned election, and we could have a voice vote to just say, voice vote, move everything back to Tuesday.
Yeah.
I think that would be, that sounds to me like the simplest option.
Okay, you can do that right now. You can call it, you don't have to withdraw the petition. If you want to call a special meeting to do a voice vote to move it back to Tuesday.
But there, we have, the petition says Australian ballot.
Right, but so VLCT is advising that if you would like to do it by voice, they said Australian ballot.
Right.
They recommended you can explain to the petitioners, it needs to be by voice vote. So we can do it by voice vote. What you can't do is call a voice vote to put it on Australian ballot.
Right.
So if what you were to do is call a special meeting, all those in attendance vote on if it should go back to Tuesday, then you can do that. And I think we also need to clear up the intent of the Tuesday. But yeah,
So
you can do
if
that.
we set up a special meeting
Mhm.
to discuss this and vote on this, is there a limit? Is there a threshold of how many people we need? Does it need to be a certain percentage of registered voters? Or could 5 people show up and 4 vote one way and 1 votes another way in that case?
No, I don't believe there's a minimum, like a town meeting, it's those. who-
So do we, it sounds like though, then we don't, you can just, thank you for the petition, and we go ahead and choose. Do we want to pick a date and?
No, so I'm a little uncomfortable about calling a special meeting for this one question. Because we could get 10 people to show up and we don't know which 10, you know, I mean, we could probably count on 12 for civil authorities.
Can I make, Jay, could I make a recommendation?
Kara, just a sec.
Another approach to this is if we take first the assumption that the petition, we don't have to, there's no withdrawing a petition that's been presented. All we say is it's invalid. You can't follow the wording of the petition.
Right.
So I think the term withdrawal might be not the right
Okay.
verb, but where I was going is it possible to piggyback a meeting and voice vote at a future voting event where people would naturally be coming anyway? Like what?
That would only be the next town meeting.
That sounds
Right, because there's no election this fall.
So could we do it then?
Yeah.
So you know,
What do you mean by
So,
that?
yeah, that was also part of the guidance from VLCT is if the petitioners would be okay to wait until town meeting, you could do it at town meeting.
On
but
Monday
it has
night.
to be on Monday.
It would, because you haven't changed it.
Right.
Until it's
That's-
changed
if
by
we want it
voice
to
vote.
happen, if we want it to move for next town meeting, we are going to have to call a meeting and have a voice vote.
Yeah,
There's no 2 ways about it.
right.
And since that's the case, I mean, if we went with a technical letter, then saying we would have to have a voice vote to put it on Australian ballot. If we're not going to do that because it's invalid, we still have to have a town meeting and a voice vote. There's just no way, there's no escaping it.
Can I make a
Eric?
recommendation?
Go ahead, Karen.
You're warning a public hearing for zoning changes. Why couldn't you have that vote? Why can't you warn? It saves you money. You're warning it all together. You're warning that you're going to take a voice vote for town meeting and you're going to look at zoning changes. You would get the biggest turnout possible at a public hearing.
Make it 6.
Yeah.
So
You're going to get more than 6, trust me.
And Jeff?
So, if people showed up to the zoning hearing, via Zoom, they would not be able to vote.
No,
Right.
they
Right,
have
so-
to be here in person.
So tonight, we had about 10 people here and we had 16 or 17 people on Zoom.
Mhm.
You know, there's a bigger turnout, on Zoom than we had here.
But we don't need, how many do we need? Minimum?
We don't.
So,
There's no
yeah.
limit. We could get 2 people.
I think
My concern of 10
Yeah.
people showing up is which 10.
Right.
You know, it matters, you know,
It does.
who shows up, and a smaller turnout is,
Not representative.
you know, one of the things that's interesting about this, and one of the things that I like about a controversial issue at town meeting is that it boosts attendance. You know, I mean, we get more people when there's an item on the agenda that's controversial. If we had, no,
Don't go there.
Okay, Barb?
Can I just observe 20, hindsight being perfect at 2020, in retrospect, we might have brought this up as a voice vote issue at town meeting,
we
right?
could, right?
As opposed to the petition. Trying to follow the rules of the purported rules of Australian ballot, instead we
Is-
sort of said other business.
Is other business by voice vote
It's not
It's non-binding. That's just a suggestion to the select board. Am I
Could have
correct?
been on the warning though.
Have to be warned and then.
Warned for a voice vote.
Yeah, you're
I
right.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm just thinking how
Yeah.
to move forward. There's no way to avoid the combination of the warning and the voice vote.
And if our goal is to give voters an option before next town meeting, we've learned that it is required to have a voice vote. And the way to do that is a special meeting.
So my recommendation is we bite the bullet and we pick a day that's not quite, I know the days are getting longer, but we're going to get more participation if people don't have to drive after dark to go to the meeting. I would propose, for example, the first Tuesday in May, throwing it out there.
Does it set another meeting? Another meeting, so.
I would propose that it be a Saturday.
Saturday meeting? Okay, I can work with that. Lisa?
I'm okay with that.
A Saturday meeting?
It's not gonna be long.
If you can get some
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream would be good.
Jay, can I ask Jeff a question?
Jeff, will you accept a question from Karen?
Well,
Sure.
you're concerned about the number of people, and I just want to ask you, if you think that you're worried about 6 people making a decision on when town meeting is going to be, aren't you worried about the same 6 people making a decision on zoning regulations? I think the justice of the pieces would notify everybody who signed their petition to attend the meeting if they cared to have it be at a vote. So I think you would get people there. I'm just putting it out there that if 6 people can decide on the zoning of the town, I think
They can't.
the 100 and however many signatures they got,
The 6
that could
people,
decide.
the 6 people who are voting on the zoning regulations are actually the 5, which is us.
No.
We have-
Jeff said he'd get 6 people there. I'm just talking to Jeff's question of 6 people.
No. We are the people who vote on the zoning changes. We have not agreed to put it before a townwide vote, just so you know. Aaron,
It's a hearing.
MMC TV, Aaron?
I have a question just as me, Aaron. I was wondering about not letting people vote over Zoom, because I certainly tape a lot of these meetings and a lot of people meet over Zoom and the quorum over Zoom is formed and people vote that way all the time anyway. So why not let people vote over Zoom? Just a question. Thanks.
So when we moved town meeting, well, I know that question came up when we talked about having town meeting like virtual, or there was a special ability to go to Australian ballot. And the answer was that you could not hold a voice vote with people on Zoom and people in the room. For a voice vote, for a committee, it's different because you can do a roll call vote and identify specific people, where if it's just general ayes and nays. The advice, it's probably in statute, but that's what I recall for moving things virtual. Yeah.
It used to be that you weren't allowed to vote by phone. Like if we were on the school board, I remember when we were on the school board, you needed to be in the room because the people who were making the decision need to hear from everybody directly. But that was a while ago, and that was before Zoom.
Yeah, and I think some of that, well, that might have actually changed before the pandemic. You were allowed to call in or video in, but I know now, obviously, we've been doing it for a while. And we had 100% virtual meetings, but it is different for a committee vote versus a town-wide voice vote.
So if there's a call for either division or count,
Yeah.
the procedure is.
Well, so what do you think the urgency of this question is?
I think we should do it sooner rather than later, because in midsummer, I don't
Next
think.
town meeting.
Well, no, to be sure, but the question is doing it on April 1st, Saturday, versus doing it in July. In July, people are not going to be thinking about this. They're not going to really care.
No, you don't want to do it over summer.
Before school break.
I would say let's do it April, one of the Saturdays in April, and just get it over with, and then give people enough time to say, if you care, get to the polls. But then we would have to also work with the JPs, because we would need to be able to get people there in case there was division. We had to do paper ballots. So what do you think, Marshall and Linda?
I would prefer, or rather, I would suggest that we might get a stronger response if we move briskly on the issue
We just had town meeting, a bunch of folks signed a petition. I think there's a clear momentum of an interest to be able to vote on the question.
Right, hence
So
my
let's do
question
that.
of April 1st, April 8th.
Sure.
Can
Not
we
April
get-
first, April
is-
Fool's Day.
I think it's agreed to.
We already did, it. Well, we'll go.
Before we,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, just before we get carried away with like going tomorrow. And I agree, we should keep the conversation going. I would appreciate not making that decision tonight,
Yeah.
because if we're gonna hold this at Campbell's Hill Middle School, we need to make sure that they
You're
have
right.
everything available. We also have, I know there's warning notices, and what is it, 45 days for a special meeting, Linda?
Okay.
What is it for town meeting? Is it 30 or 45? I just don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I want to say 45.
So
Okay.
we would have to make sure that we get those procedural things in order.
So we're looking more like May or June.
I would think probably yes.
So could we table this and come back with a sort of plan and proposal at our next meeting, which is a week from tonight?
And I might
Wait,
suggest.
David's got his hand up. David.
Sorry.
So I suggested a Saturday meeting for two reasons. A nighttime meeting, we're dealing with darkness. And town meeting is on a Tuesday, which is town meeting day, which some people still have off. But they wouldn't have the weekday off for this particular meeting, whereas more people
Right.
have Saturday off. So looking at availability, it would make sense to me,
Mhm.
one person, that a Saturday meeting would make sense.
I think it makes sense to do, Marshall.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but the tasks of doing some of this footwork, is that something that perhaps could be delegated by a appointed committee that reports back to the select board?
Board of Civil Authority.
As
of course,
opposed,
seems like a
as
great
opposed to asking
committee.
you folks to
That's you too.
look time?
Yeah, well,
Okay, so if we want to make a motion to ask the Board of Civil Authority to research dates for a Saturday town meeting or what have you, it doesn't have to be Saturday, but whatever you guys come back
Just-
with.
Research and come back with a proposal.
For time, date, location?
Yeah.
I don't think we need a formal motion.
Yeah, I don't really think we do, just, we're meeting again in a week, so do you guys think you can,
Do it within a week?
well, the sooner you get an idea, the sooner the 45-day clock can start ticking.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
Okay.
And so our next meeting is next
Monday.
week. And technically, this is a discussion of a petition to hold a vote. So now we're talking somewhat slightly different. It's not just a petition, it's an alternative to the petition.
Mhm.
So we warn it slightly differently in the next agenda, I think.
Meeting for a voice vote.
I mean, it's.
It's not a petition to ask to vote. It's a warning for we're voting.
Well, right, this is what it says today.
The word
Discussion of
action.
petition to hold a vote to consider moving town meeting day to the first Tuesday in March.
And
We hold the
I,
petition invalid, so it's a discussion.
No, but
They do. They actually do something that's illegal.
But
We can't do it.
It's not the right day.
But my understanding of the way VLCT is interpreting it is that the board is fulfilling the petition by doing what they can legally
Right.
do to hold
We're
it by
honoring the
voice.
intent of the
Yeah.
petition.
Trying to honor the petition.
Should we
is-
choose to do that? So the powers in the board could also say, this is flawed,
Right, I
take
think,
the away.
Right.
but you know,
I interpret it's our discretion, seriously. It's a flawed petition,
Yeah.
not, it's a well-intended petition, it's
Yeah.
asking us to do something we can't do. So now my real point is about what the next
Sure.
agenda item says.
Discussion of a
Of
town
holding the
vote
Yeah,
to
Right.
consider moving
special
town meeting
meeting
day.
to hold a vote.
Okay,
we're moving
Taken
forward with the
principle.
principal petition, but it no
Right.
longer needs to be reflective of the petition itself. Is how I'm interpreting. it.
Yeah.
And could I just ask, if we do VLCT and Secretary of State, once we're all said and done and almost there, could Josh just okay it and have our town attorney look over it? Just so it doesn't happen again?
sure,
Sure.
in the next 3
The
days.
the warning, the
That's-
warning for
I-
a special meeting.
Oh, you mean for the warning?
For the warning,
Okay, so like,
Oh,
once we get a date.
Yeah. See
Yeah,
what I'm
sure.
saying?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
after the next discussion.
After the next discussion, just to make sure that we're not missing
We've
anything.
got one swing and a
Because
miss.
we've got Secretary of State, we've got Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and you'll do the town attorney.
To make sure the article is properly worded.
Perfect, perfect.
okay. So it
So
sounds
just
like,
give, I guess, sorry, but if we're gonna do that, then we should come back next Monday with, here's the date that we want to do that, but set that date far enough out so that we've got 2 weeks to really get all that extra stuff done and then come back to officially do the warning. So we're gonna need like
Several weeks.
45 days plus 3 weeks or so, because we're gonna have to probably get it in the paper, things like that, just to make sure that we've got time. Not trying to delay it, just trying to make sure we do it right.
Our next meeting is the 20th, and then the one after that is April 3rd.
Okay,
That's like 52 or 3 days. Oh, no, no.
okay, so while we're counting on our toes,
Starts to add up.
I think we've got to pass forward on this.
Yep.
The other item that was asked to be brought forward was item M, discussion of public engagement, Bridge Street sidewalk. Essentially, do we wish to, and we can certainly take input tonight, to be sure. And I think there were probably some people on the call who are here to speak to that point. But do we also want to consider having a special board meeting or some other format to seek public input? So I declare the subject open. There's no specific motion to be made, so.
So there's no action to take relative to Church Street sidewalk at this time.
Church Street?
I mean.
Church
Street.
Right,
Sidewalk.
but do we wish to take input from the public on this issue?
You know, it's 9:30. You know, so my preference would be to have it as a warned item when we are discussing this, and there are two opportunities to discuss it. One is when we have a grant application, to receive that grant if that comes up. And the other is, there's a request in front of the ARPA committee. And when we discuss sidewalks, when the ARPA committee is done with their work and then makes recommendations to the select board, it'll be at that time that we discuss all of the recommendations for ARPA, and there should be ample time to discuss how that goes. That would be my preference.
Okay. David, Lisa, Bard, comments on getting input relating to sidewalks? Seeing none. Chris?
Yeah.
John, brother.
I was just gonna say, as a member of the, John Hart, I'm a member of the transportation committee.
Sorry, I can't hear him. Can't hear him.
Kara wishes to hear your dulcet tones, so.
John Cart, I'm a member of the Transportation Committee, and I think at least the 2, maybe 3 other members are online here. We could go over we pulled out all the minutes from previous meetings where there was discussion, all that, if you want to hear that now or at a future meeting. It's all available. As well as design, draft designs and sketches and the like.
My recommendation, and I'm only one member of the board, would be that we put this as virtually the first item on a future meeting so that people can come and know that it'll be addressed and not have to wait 3 hours to get to weigh in.
I agree with those materials, focused materials distributed to, like, as part of the conversation. Right? Because I know I've heard 2 strong opinions on both sides. Do it, don't do it. And so I think it's significant money compared. Sidewalks are already expensive, but with the hillside, it's even more expensive. Pushing the hillside back. So I think it's reasonable for people to be asking about the return on investment, if you will, or how we're spending that much money.
Is there a concern about unmarked graves?
Yes.
Okay. Is there some way to probe for those before?
Or use ground sensing radar, yeah.
Yeah.
But we also have to remember that even if we,
I can find a septic tank with an antenna.
yeah,
So I should just say, maybe before we get into that level, when you got the time, we can show you the sketches or designs. It's not like the sidewalks are going to be going up the slope and over the top into the cemetery. Talking about the standard green strip, 5-foot sidewalk. But again, rather than get into some of those details and have people conjuring up stuff that maybe isn't all that accurate, if you want to have this discussion where we can show you the sketches, it might help keep everyone focused and reduce the level of tension so they can really dig into
some way we could explore cheaply and get some good information.
Right.
Real soon.
Right. Well, when Josh and I are discussing the agenda for next
Yeah.
Monday's meeting,
Yeah.
my advice again would be to put this toward the top of the agenda and then not just do the usual warning, but do a specific notice and form. If you care about this topic, this would be a good time to come because we'll have all the documents.
Next
Yeah.
Monday might not be the best.
Yeah, and
Maybe not
I mean,
next
we've
Monday,
had
maybe the first Monday,
engineers or
the first
Yeah.
Monday.
designers working on it and stuff, so.
Design work is straightforward. I think it's this question.
What it's on.
Mhm. Oh, right.
Talked about that.
Yeah.
That's gonna be sort of top of the meeting.
I would recommend we start with a presentation from the Transportation Committee that both looks at the material, presents them, and you probably do it in 10 minutes, right? Like,
And then a
what
million
is the map,
questions.
here's the organization, here's what we did, why we did it.
Yeah, the history of it, all the research and the work done. Yeah, happy to do that.
So do we want to aim for April 3rd, Josh, based on what you just said to me?
Yeah, I think the 21st would not. be-
Let's aim for
the
April
23rd
3rd
would be good.
to have that be item number 1 on the agenda. Does that sound okay, people from the Transportation Committee?
Kathleen or Chris or whoever.
Is that a night you could be?
Sounds great to me. My brain typically stops functioning around 9:30.
Yeah.
And it sounds fine to me too.
Oh, Denise?
In the essence of time for the meeting on April 3rd, is there a committee or an organization in Montpelier that deals with ancient cemeteries? I mean, I've lived here all my life and I've always heard that certain stones from this cemetery got moved to Riverview when that opened, but they didn't move the bodies.
Right. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. that's-
So, and I'm just wondering if there's an organization in Montpelier, part of a historical society that might deal with that and might have some of those records.
Maybe we could ask the Cemetery Commission to follow up on that, because it relates to archaeology, like it's like an archaeological thing. In other parts of the country where disadvantaged groups were buried various places and then they started building over them, it's more common. So I think there is kind of a scientific protocol on what you do. I don't know what it is.
Okay, so we'll try to get all that researched and tentatively, well, we've just told the Transportation Committee April 3rd, but let's aim for April 3rd to have this discussion and to encourage members of the public to come.
So just as a point of order, after this information is presented, it's not necessarily a decision point for it. Is that correct? So what we did, this is be like an educational agenda item where we would learn about the different issues. And I definitely support getting public input on it, because it's an issue of concern. But, I don't want to set up an expectation that night we're going to be making a decision about one thing. or
No,
another.
I think it should be clear this is for information to be shared from the Transportation Committee and then for us to receive input from the public.
Public stakeholder input.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
And thanks Kathleen
Excellent,
and Christopher. Okay, so we're hopping around on the agenda. We have already done H. And we are now moving on into I, records retention policy. So this is a continuation of a discussion from a prior meeting. There is a draft record retention policy in the package. Josh, would you be able to bring that up?
Found it.
Okay.
And
So at the last meeting, I'm reading from the memo, the board expressed a desire to adopt a policy that would mandate retention of financial documents for 5 years after an audit. A draft policy is included in the packet, which is what we have on the screen. This policy is based on the template from the Vermont Secretary of State.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So this would, sort of the meat of it is in this section here where it talks about essentially financial documents, the retention requirements for the state is audit complete plus 0 years. We would keep these an additional 5 years, which has been our practice anyway. This would just formalize that practice. And I pulled these references off of, it was this sheet here that talks about exactly, was it that sheet? It's GRS retention references, and that has the specific numbers and wording, and so there's references back to those items in the above links.
Questions from the board? Do I have a motion to adopt the records retention policy as offered?
This is Bart. I move to adopt the records retention policy as presented here this evening.
This is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bart, second from David. Any further comments on the item?
So.
Oh, Kara, go ahead.
Oh,
Actually,
let me
Jeff,
talk first.
sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
So this is for paper document. It's not for electronic?
Correct, for paper doc, for electronic, we had talked about, and maybe we need add to this or adopt a second policy. We talked about keeping it.
Indefinite.
Bart?
That's not what I says.
Written or recorded information.
Regardless of physical form or character, written or recorded information.
Yeah, so, and I'm just informed by my experience in state government where records are records. Like the only thing it's not a record is speech.
Okay. So then I guess I would think that we want to keep recorded longer. Like scanned documents, we can keep virtually forever because they don't take up much space.
Do we want to
wanna
redraft
amend
this
this?
or do we want to amend it tonight?
I'm comfortable with amending it tonight. just
Okay.
Explicitly calling out electronic documents as not being.
Josh, can we just amend it by saying we have a list of specific documents that we want to keep longer or something like that?
Yeah.
Do we have such a list?
I'm just gonna recommend that in terms of wordsmithing, it's really hard to do in less than 15 or 20 minutes. So I would recommend, I'd be willing to withdraw the motion. We modify this, to come back with separate records retention schedule for written versus electronic records. And vote on it at a future date, whether next meeting or the meeting thereafter.
Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn. So I have withdrawn. Second's been withdrawn. Kara, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for looking into this and doing the research on it to.
You just muted yourself again.
I actually didn't touch anything, so that was kind of odd. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to put this in place. I want to thank you for withdrawing the motion to take up the idea of the electronic files. I would just like to also have you take up the idea of potentially, I know that electronic files would be a solution to the possibility of projects going for years. Do you know what I mean? If it's beyond a 5-year time period, but it's still part of a larger project or different phases of a project, I think it would be important to keep. So maybe when you're talking about the electronic files, maybe there's some kind of loophole in there for they don't destroy.
5 years
I don't know
after.
how you're going to word it. I know you're going to rework it, and good luck with that. But just keep in mind if it's a project that expands phases and years beyond 5.
Yeah, I know that in the documents and these links and it's referenced, they do talk about specific like federally funded projects to kind of put a scope on, and those I think they say you keep them forever. I think it's a good idea to try to keep records related to projects for longer, but how do we define a project?
That's hard because let's say there's a sewer expansion project and we say, oh, that ended 5 years ago and we destroy the records. But then a year later, somebody says, well, I want to see those records. And we say, well, we destroyed those because that project's over. And they say, well, no, because the sewer system is an ongoing project. So we might want to refer to that. So
That's, yeah, or we pave a road and 6 years later, was that a project that we should have saved? I think you can, Carol, I'm not trying to.
I think maintenance and routine work is something different than a project. And I think you can possibly identify that. I mean, I think you have certain bills, like your legal bills that are broken down into details of different projects. You should keep those, but your power bill, maybe you don't need to keep your power bill after 5 years. I think you can possibly define some things pretty basically, but if you're moving to scanning and electronic anyhow, it becomes a moot point. I understand that because more and more businesses are going to go away from sending you a paper invoice anyhow. It's called sustainability. It's called not wasting trees when you don't need to.
Can't be the only ones that are dealing with this. So VLCT and the Secretary of State should
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
that's where we.
The state tends to be behind in new technology. They used to use faxes.
Angela?
Thank you. Angela Cote. I'd like to add some clarity maybe to the idea of longer projects and the time period of 5 years. If it's a project that's still under like bond and we're still making a payment on it, then maybe things like that might be considered a project worth retaining the records for. If we're still making a payment on that project, similar to what David has already indicated about water and sewer projects. That's just a suggestion. Thank you.
In some cases, we're looking at 30-year bonds, but I don't think it's a bad point.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion and second for discussion of this has been, for approving this has been withdrawn. And so this will come back up at a future meeting, possibly next week, possibly the one after that, we'll see. Is there anything else that people want to share about this tonight? Okay. Our next item on the agenda is consideration of approving leases for tenants. We're at the town center. We are talking about the Richmond Historical Society, the Community Senior Center, and Mount Mansfield Community Television for office space here on the third floor for 2 years, 2-year terms as presented, and naming Josh as the town's authorized rep. The leases are in your packet, and I assume people have had a chance to look at them. Does anybody have anything about them they'd like to bring up or look at?
I mean, maybe just
We can
one-
share them on the screen if you'd like, or.
I'll just say that the only thing we changed based on the last conversation was the dates. Everything else, all the other wording remains exactly the same as we had 2 years ago. We just extended the term another 2 years.
So my only question is why not make it fiscal year? You know, it's in May, I think, is the date of the contract. You know, why not into June?
So the way they're based right now is based on, I think there were some staggered starts to these, so I just tried to go right up to the end of one lease, and so that there wasn't like an overlap. I suppose, so you're saying make the end dates to the end of June, so we make it 2 years plus a little bit.
It makes more sense to be fiscal year.
That works for me.
Sure.
And there's still the out clause if there is a reason.
Or when do you expire after June? No, I don't think. Just want to make sure we're not shortening. Well, I guess if we shorten somebody, we shorten somebody.
Get it on cycle.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so just changed end dates to June 30th.
Okay, so we have a draft motion that says as presented, so whoever makes the motion will need to state the change.
So I move to approve leases with Richmond Historical Society, the Community Senior Center, and Mount Mansfield Community Television for office space on the third floor of the town center for approximately 2-year terms as presented, as amended to end on our fiscal year, and to name the town manager, Josh Arneson, as a duly authorized representative.
I will second that.
And we have a motion from Jeff and a second from Bard.
Just one question. Do we want to do anything to prorate the dollar per year that Historical Society, or do we just say that that dollar for the second year extends to June 30th? Just, I mean, it's going to be 20 cents.
No.
The dollar extends.
I'll pay the 20
Okay.
cents.
Laugh, about 20 for a rent.
I just want to, just to make sure we're
Talking
crossing
about-
eyes, dotting Ts,
That's
all the way around.
That's pretty good though.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
okay, moving on. Our next item on the
I
agenda.
have to vote on this, right?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh, we didn't actually vote. Please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, now we can move on. Item K on the agenda, consideration of approving a grant application for congressionally directed spending. So our two senators and our congressperson have various grants that the town can apply for, and as noted in the memo, Senator Welch's deadline is a little further out, and we don't qualify for anything from Representative Balint, but we do think we would qualify for the National Park Service Historic Preservation Fund that Senator Sanders would be over. And I believe that would be something best spoken to by the Town Center Committee Chair.
Yes. So this is similar to last year, congressional discretionary spending proposals, that's earmarks. It's the new term for earmarks. I submitted one application last week because the deadline. Somehow they come up with the grant language deadline like a week after they release it. I don't know how they do this, but it's remarkable. So the deadline was last Friday before we had a select board meeting, so I submitted that one. The next one's coming up this week on Thursday. I talked to Rebecca Ellis, who's the state director for Senator Welch. She said essentially the same application that we did with Sanders would be okay to do for her, for Welch. And I think it's probably unlikely that we'll get either. But it's worth a try.
Okay. So we need to retroactively approve what Jeff has already done. So there's a draft motion in the memo. If somebody would like to make that
This
motion.
is Bart. I move to approve and retroactively approve submitting applications for Senator Sanders and Senator Welch's congressionally directed funding, formerly known as earmarks, for improvements at the town center and to name town manager Josh Arneson as the grant manager.
This is David. I'll second.
We have a motion from Bard. We have a second from David. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Jay, aye. Okay.
Oh.
Our next item on the agenda is an update on our hiring of a planning and zoning director and police chief. I will give Josh a second, or Josh as we're calling him now.
I'm reading his last name as I'm speaking.
I do the same thing.
I've had worse nicknames.
Care to share?
No.
We're a beer later, maybe. Okay, so let's see. So we have hired a director of planning and zoning. We hired Keith Oborn. You might remember him. He was our zoning administrative officer for a year. He went over to Charlotte for a year. He was interested in coming back because he has a long history in planning and has enjoyed working in planning more so than zoning. He does understand that some of this job is overseeing the zoning administrative officer and being involved there. But I think he's really looking forward to getting back into planning. He met with myself and Virginia and Chris a couple of times. And both Virginia and Chris also seem to enjoy, like him and think they'll work well with him. He is going to be starting on March 27th. Another thing that I think Virginia and Chris liked about it is that he has a lot of experience putting the regulations into work and working with them and not just writing them. And I think that that's helpful as you review how will this actually be put into practice. So looking forward to getting him on board on March 27th. For the police chief hiring process, the committee's taking a bit more time to review. We've got 3 different documents that we work on for reviewing police chief applicants. We have a matrix that we work on that allows us to go through and look at applications from the applicants. So just the paper formats. From that, we make decisions on who we're going to call in for interview. There are interview questions that we will ask them, as well as a strategic plan that we ask everybody who comes in for an interview to have a strategic writing piece that responds to that strategic plan. The committee has taken a good deal of time to go through and really analyze the matrix interview questions and the strategic plan writing exercise. Previous iterations, we've done that in one meeting. We're on our 3rd meeting tomorrow reviewing that. But I think it's a good, thoughtful process, as there's been lots of questions and changes in policing in the last couple of years. And we're just trying to make sure that we get this right before we start treating applicants. My anticipation is that we will complete that process tomorrow, then start to review applicants in the next week and then reach out for interviews. So we're about, I think, a week behind of what I was hoping for in the schedule. I've updated that, put that on the packet as well.
Okay. So in the memo, it mentions that June Heston is on that committee.
Thank you.
And she was placed on the committee as a member of the select board as a select board seat. We have the option of saying, no, there have to be 2 select board members and appointing somebody. But Josh's recommendation is that we not increase the size of the committee. So if we put another select board member on, that would mean June would have to come off. I think that would be a very foolish idea. I think we should keep June in that seat.
I agree.
I'm seeing no argument.
Okay, 3 of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
I think June is incredibly valuable in that respect since I wish you were here. I love saying every relative she's had since the dawn of time is a police officer. And she always says, not that many, but
And I'll just remind, I brought this up at the committee itself, remind the committee and ourselves that this is supportive of Josh. It is not the committee making a
Right.
decision. It is a committee supporting Josh in the activity of screening, interviewing, and hiring.
correct. Yep. Good point.
Josh, is the hiring, the filter or whatever you want to call it, is it about the same as we've used before? Have we added to it, changed it?
Yes, okay.
That's a good answer.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think more so just trying to update it to make sure that, items that have been a particular focus in the last couple of years are added to that review.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is review of the select board calendar. It was included in your packet, document 3O. If you would be so kind as to share it. People often ask us, I hear being on the select board is incredibly cool and you guys have nonstop fun. And so for those of you watching at home, here's
We're
our,
the only ones that say that, right?
right. Yeah.
And again, this is just sort of this is sort of just the annual
Right.
bare bones that comes up, not including everything that comes up each week.
So I was struck, this resonates with me we sort of done it intermittently in the past. One of the things we might contemplate are what are the other priority tasks that we know of and could plug into our calendar moving forward. And I'm not picking this as absolutes, but perhaps examples. Like if we wanted to review the personnel policy or guidelines, which probably merits review on some intermittent basis, right? As opposed to you look at it someday when there's a problem and it's 10 years old. Yeah. Records retention policy, we put it on here and check it off.
Mhm.
I think it's like that.
I like that.
But I think we could use it beyond the known cycle, deferring to Jay and you might use it to help fill in. When could other things happen? Because there are times of the year that it gets more dense, like budget season, there's a lot more going on. So if we're going to add other policy reviews or other issues, we'd probably either farm it out and bring it back, like to committees or subgroups, or try to fill in gaps in the calendar. Does that make sense as a sort of thought on how to use it?
Sure. I might expand on that in that, just thinking about those items might be an agenda item in and of itself. Thinking strategically about, community policing, for example, might be we could schedule that discussion rather than have it, just react to it. Similarly, the fire department is something that's been on our to-do list for quite some time. We might schedule it. But I think it's too late to come up with them now, but I think if we had a discussion about what strategic issues we want to tackle this year, and we might not be able to get to all of them. But we have a lot of institutional knowledge, particularly between Bard and David, about issues that are a continual problem, and I think it would be worthwhile having a discussion on that.
Such as the annual end of the summer review of parking nightmares.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's easy to get sort of amused by it, but it's actually true. It's both amusing and true. We could do like a mid-course review. We know we're going to run into recreational parking and traffic issues.
Exactly.
We know we're going to run into other traffic calming measures, and if we have a sense of the timeline for that, I think policing, community policing, at some point that may be indeterminate. We might even do a whiteboard following your idea here of what are the issues we know are coming up, prioritize them and say, where do they fit in? One thing that we wrestled with before, two things that have been brought up over the years. One is our town website. which is immensely improved
Yeah.
by a combination of efforts of different people. The idea that we'd have like ordinances and policies all in one place.
Yeah, it's great.
Seriously,
That's
I
right,
started that
communication
conversation
ticket,
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's now in the last year come to fruition, not by my effort, but others. So there may be things like that, that like, if we put them into our agenda, would be more likely to move forward. And recognizing we are always gonna deal with limited bandwidth of our staff and town manager in particular.
And aging select board members.
I'm not aging. I just had to go backward.
I quit aging.
I'm 35.
So maybe that's a future agenda item to say, you know, discussion of policy and priority issues for the select board.
For the coming year.
For the coming year.
Yeah.
And I think it's really prudent to do it now with a slightly different and reconfigured select board. It seems like the timing's pretty good in the near term. That makes sense. Very much.
Okay,
So thanks for pulling this out and
Yeah.
following us on that.
Sure, thank you for the reminder to just.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna go home. You wanna put me there on the agenda there for next night?
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, supporting it, yeah, okay. We can talk about that next agenda.
Not now,
For coming.
okay? Shut your eyes.
got it.
Hang it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is review of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders. We have two sets of minutes to approve, those from the February 21st regularly scheduled meeting of the select board and those from the informational session on Saturday, March 4th. Let's begin with February 21st. Does anybody have any additions, corrections, deletions to those minutes?
Jay, this is David. I move to approve the minutes of the February 21st meeting.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from David and a second from Jeff to approve the minutes of the February 21st meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
I'll abstain.
Jeff, I.
Hard eye.
Jay, aye. Our next minutes were the informational session on March 4th. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from David and a second from Bard to approve the minutes of March 4th. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Abstain.
Jeff, I.
Hard eye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, moving on to our warrants and purchase orders. In the packet, it looked like we had just one purchase order, but I noticed on the warrant sheet, there were two listed.
Two listed?
Yeah. On warrant general here, purchase order 4540 and 4543.
4583. Were those not, those are previously.
These have already been taken care of.
Approved.
Okay,
Yeah,
they're
I
already
think they
approved.
should have been in the invoice.
Yes.
They should have been standing behind the invoices.
Spending off of purchase.
Okay.
order.
Yeah, those
So
are
the-
previous.
Okay, those are previous. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or corrections or concerns about any of the warrants? Or let's do the purchase order first. Okay, we have a purchase order for the Richmond Water Resources Department.
Mrs. Bard moved to approve purchase order number 4583 to Richmond Water Resources Department. Fire protection at 51148 and 0 cents.
Okay.
Jay, this is David. I second.
A motion from Bard and a second from David to approve that purchase order 4583. Any discussion?
Well, it's just so for my information, so, because I'm not on the water sewer.
All the cool people are.
Yeah. Right, you're right, and I'm not one of those cool person. So this is for, is a payment from the this is payment from us to the water sewer,
Yes,
okay, and it's for the tank,
we put in a really big tank for fire protection
Right.
as well as adding fire hydrants along East Main
Okay.
Street. So this is the portion of that tank, which is strictly fire protection, which serves no benefit to the water and sewer users outside of their portion of fire protection.
so it's the town paying for fire protection. The piece
Fire
of
protection portion of the bond
of the bond.
on the tank.
So this part, I just point out that this addresses something that was largely ignored when the town and the village joined.
Yep.
So for some number of decades, the village taxpayers subsidized the town. I'll note that the village taxpayers, the residential taxpayers, according to an income survey, are demonstrably lower income than the town as a whole.
Yeah.
So what you had was a minority of the town, lower income, paying for the fire protection infrastructure for the entire town. So this sort of levels the playing field. Just like everyone pays in for a fire truck, whether you use it or not.
Right.
So in this case, the customers who live in town pay not only for their water and sewer, but they, along with everybody else, contributes towards the fire protection fee. So the fire protection fee is not just the other people, it's all the people.
So state of Vermont said, Richmond Water and Sewer Commission, you need to replace your tank. And the fire department said, well, we need a tank big enough for fire protection. So Water and Sewer Commission was faced with charging 400 people to pay for fire protection for 4,000 people.
Okay.
Didn't sound like a good plan.
No.
So the cool kids got together.
All right, thank you for that.
Okay, so we've approved that purchase order. Now, does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Jeff.
Did we approve this?
No, we didn't vote.
Oh, we didn't vote? Okay, maybe we should vote. Any other questions before we vote? Okay, let's vote.
David, I.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, any questions about the warrants? Lisa, there's a tradition I think I should make you aware of. Huh? Same stuff, yeah. June Heston had an unusually skilled eye at spotting. Yes.
I was hoping she was gonna stay and.
Yeah.
I was trying to do the same.
So,
thing.
so you get extra
June
points.
shared with me that she wants Lisa to take on that.
That's-
Yes, I was gonna say.
Well,
So that's
Can we
your
vote on
charge.
that?
hear from her.
No, actually, in truth, it used to be kind of the weird responsibility. We would make one person on the select board. It would be their job to catch all that. And that was like, why is it that one person's job? We should all be looking. So that's
Yeah.
why, because sometimes we will miss things, or Connie will miss things, Josh will miss things, we'll miss things. And sometimes it could be a big deal. Like, Jeff, if you share your story about your great triumph.
Oh,
Oh, but wait, I dug through it. Found we spent $20,000 in salt just like this winter.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we used to have two salt vendors and one of the salt vendors is no longer available. So now there's a monopoly.
Yeah, well. it shows-
Bitter
I'm
reality.
surprised. I mean, I don't know what salt goes for exactly.
So anyway, Jeff,
So I found in going through the warrants that Green Mountain Power was charging us for the wrong streetlight. We converted our street lights to LED and they were charging us for old technology back
That's
5
like-
years.
$1,100 every 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, well, it's so, you know,
It's over what, 20,000?
it's over $20,000.
Yeah, yeah. So
right? So even though we won't all be able to go, wait a second, that's kind of the purpose of us looking through them. We're signing these
I
things.
was wondering why they cost so much. I wasn't sure when to ask or who to ask or absorb a little more. but-
Now.
Okay.
Yeah. The funnest part about being on the select board is at the end of the meeting, when Josh takes a big folder that has all these sign here flags on it and throws them at us.
Mhm.
But when we're signing those, the idea is that we've reviewed them first. We're not just signing
Sure,
things.
exactly.
And it is a responsibility we have to the town voters to make sure their money it's just another set of eyes. It's part of the overall financial control. So thank you in advance for all the time you're going to be spending doing June's work.
And
It's back in pieces.
just to add quickly to what Jay said, COVID actually improved our process because prior to COVID, we weren't scanning anything and there was just, well, I've got the packets here.
Oh, that's
There were
horrible.
there were these folders.
We're sitting here.
So, right, so that's where going back to what Jay was saying, one board member would try to come in between Friday afternoon and Monday afternoon to look through all of that, to then bring back any, and now we just scan it and everybody has access to look at it on the board. So
Scanning is-
just a little history
That's
that.
the way to go.
Kills their
makes it-
weekend
And
as well.
record retention and helps a lot. Yep.
Yeah, so the forest and the trees.
Yeah.
And the brain cells.
Okay,
Yeah,
so do we have a motion to approve the warrant?
So moved.
This Bard, I will second it.
A motion from David and a second from Barr to approve the warrants. Any discussion? Seeing none, state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. The warrants are approved. Okay, our next item for the agenda is our next item of business is items for the next agenda. Josh has been here taking notes like a house on fire all night. Anything you'd like to have added?
one thing that's come up peripherally a couple of times is Bombardier Field and Richmond Land Trust. It seems like we ought to have a conversation about we're hitting March, before you know it's gonna be April, then it's gonna be May, people are gonna be parking places. So perhaps engage them in what's their plan for the field.
Yeah, so maybe invite the Richmond Land Trust to speak about, maybe not at the 20th or at April 3rd, but at sometime soon.
So I think they have a meeting coming up end of March where they're trying to get feedback from people on what they want to do. with the
Yes,
field.
I think it's a public meeting,
I
isn't
think
it?
it's like March 29th.
Yeah, I went to that one last year.
But yeah, this one's probably gonna be, I mean, they're warning it further ahead of time. Yeah, I think it is the 29th. So it might be good to follow up with them after that to see what they're thinking.
So that might be worth posting in like Front Porch Forum in our town agenda, if it's a public meeting related to that field. It's sort of an odd hybrid where I forget what we contributed a town towards the purchase of the field, so why we don't own it, there's.
I don't know if we, well, maybe probably a
David,
conservation fund.
That's
do
what
you
I'm
have the motions? For the next time of business?
Oh, wait, are you?
I'm not jumping to them yet. I just
I've
want to
got,
make sure
no, I've got the motions.
you've got the motions.
Yep,
Okay.
I've got them ready for you guys.
Okay, anything else to put on next time's agenda? Not that this is your last chance, but if, while we're here.
It is a quick turnaround, so.
Okay.
If you don't speak now.
Okay, our next item of business is executive session if needed, and I believe that David has some motions there.
Jay, this is David. I move to find the premature public knowledge about a personnel issue would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Do I have a second?
This Bart, I will second that.
We have a motion from David and a second from Bard to find that an executive session would be necessary, et cetera, et cetera. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye. Jeff, aye. Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Hey, David.
Jay, this is David. I move that we enter into executive sessions to discuss a personnel issue under the provisions of section 1 DSA 313A subsection 3 and to invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
I think we have a second.
We're getting slap happy.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from David and a second from Lisa. Okay,
Aye.
are we ready for the ready for the vote?
Yeah.
This is the
David,
vote
aye.
to move into executive session.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, so
Could
you
I
will
take
now,
a
bathroom break,
Yeah.
and
2-minute
now,
breaker,
I think we should all just,
go to next.
but we need to tell Aaron what's going on.
oh, yeah. So Aaron and Duncan, we're gonna go to executive session. We're gonna come back. It'll be like 30 seconds of closing the meeting and moving on. So I think you guys can probably both leave. I know Duncan can. Aaron, I don't think there's anything more for you to do. I will send.
Yep, I'm gonna sign off. Have a great night.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you.
David, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? We have a motion to adjourn. Seeing none, state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.